We might get started, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the special meeting of Toowoomba Regional Council. This meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed. I'd like to thank those of you who are in the room with us today and acknowledge everyone watching via Council's social media channels. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabul and Jarrawa peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. There are no, everyone is in attendance other than Councillor Carol Taylor, who has leave of absence, and there is a declarable declaration of conflict of interest from Councillor Von Hoff, which we can deal with now, I think.
Thanks, Chair. And folks, I warn you, it's a bit of a long one. So this is a declaration of declarable conflict of interest in relation to item number 6, MCUC 2023-4579, Material Change of Use Code Intensive Horticulture Blueberry Farm. I inform this meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in this matter, as defined in section 150EN of the Local Government Act 2009. The nature of my interest is as follows, and arises as because of duties I performed in my role as Chair of the Water and Waste Portfolio. You will see attached correspondence, and correspondence was also shared with you. The first letter is dated 28th of November 2023 and is addressed to Minister for Regional Development, Manufacturing and Water, Glenn Butcher MP. Member for Condamine Pat Weir MP was also provided with a copy of this letter for completeness. This letter was sent in my capacity as Chair of the Water and Waste Portfolio of Toowoomba Regional Council, notifying the Dam Safety Regulator and the Minister's Department of, quote, concerns of potential referable dam failure, end quote. I state that, quote, several councillors attended neighbouring sites on the 27th of November 2023 where, understanding council processes, we gave no commitments and provided no opinions on the appropriateness or otherwise of the potential DA, end quote. I go on to raise the concerns raised by residents about, quote, a family of 5, mother, father and 3 boys who live directly downstream, end quote, from one of the 3 recently constructed Turkey's Nest dams, estimated to store in excess of 40 megalitres. The correspondence reads that, quote, visible cracks in the compacted soil at the rim of the dam and on the embankments, end quotes, and is accompanied by photographs. I go on, quote, a failure of the dam wall would have catastrophic safety outcomes for the family of 5 downstream. Out of a sense of urgency, the focus of this correspondence has been to relay safety concerns regarding a referable dam. I have not specified other concerns raised by neighbouring residents, including but not limited to diverted overland flow or contamination. I bring this to your attention for your awareness and action at a state government level. I wrote this letter to relay safety concerns that had been expressed to me and to discharge my duties as councillor with responsibilities in the water portfolio, noting that councillors had been informed that safety compliance of dams was the responsibility of the state government and not Toowoomba Regional Council. The second piece of correspondence is dated the 7th of February 2024, and this is directed to Ms Therese Perry and the Department of Environment, Science and Innovation, copying in former Councillor Nancy Summerfield, former acting and now current General Manager of Water and Waste Services Group Jake Passier, and former Manager of Environment and Regulatory Services Mr Kevin Jeffries. This is a pathway for water and waste as well as council compliance, relaying concerns raised with me by Mr Brian Lyons, a neighbour of the applicant. Mr Lyons detailed, quote, discontent about the contaminated water leaving the site. There is no attempt these are Mr. Lyons' words, to contain the contamination. Kids swim in rock holes downstream. Being so close to a dairy farm and Kubi Dam, I think this issue will escalate, end quote. As I write in the email, I included, quote, the EPA, as I am required to do under legislation when allegations of pollution and environmental harm are made, end quote. Again, I wrote this email as a pathway and for the State Department of Environment, Science and Innovation to relay concerns and to discharge my duties as chair of the water portfolio and as required by legislation. I do not believe I am conflicted as a result of the correspondence, and I wish to participate in the decision in relation to this matter. I acknowledge that eligible councillors must now determine, pursuant to Section 150 ES of the Local Government Act 2009, whether I, 1, may participate in the decision about the matter, including by voting on the matter, 2, must leave the meeting, including any area set aside for the public, and stay away from the meeting while eligible councillors discuss and vote on the matter, or 3, may participate in the decision about the matter subject to conditions.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, it's a matter for the council as to whether or not the councillor, first of all, may participate in the decision about the matter, including by voting on the matter, or secondly, must leave the meeting, including any area set aside for the public, and stay away from the meeting while the eligible councillors discuss and vote on the matter, or 3, may participate in the decision about the matter subject to conditions. Mayor?
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chair. Look, it's my feeling, given the information that's been provided, that the council was discharging her duties as a councillor, and nowhere in the correspondence does it seem to me that the councillor has made an assumption of which way she may support or otherwise a decision if it were to come to council. She was merely quoting constituents, quoting community members on their concerns, and therefore discharging her duty as a councillor to then add her weight to those concerns to the relevant ministers and associated staff. So therefore, under the Act, there is no reason why the councillor shouldn't be able to stay in the room and vote. The reasons are simply that the council was discharging her duties as a councillor, and sorry, I'll go slower. And I'll just wait for Wendy to in the end. The council was discharging her duties, and in no way has the correspondence indicated a predetermined view if this matter was to come to council. Full stop.
Any further contributions from councillors? Councillor Melissa?
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion? The only point I would make is that in the third last paragraph of the letter to Minister Butcher, councillor asserts that a failure of the dam wall would have catastrophic safety outcomes for the family of the 5 downstream. In addition, there would be significant impacts on neighbouring properties. That would be the only item of concern that I would have, but others may not share that. Councillor Tim?
Thanks, Chair. Look, the second part, the raising of the pathway, I don't think there's anyone here who hasn't raised pathways similar to that. So it's not something I at all have a concern with. We can only go on the guide that we've been given, and that's interests where a reasonable person might think you could be biased. And it's actually a good one for us to test, because we're often told having opinion on a matters prior to it coming to this meeting could lead to a conflict. And the only way it could lead to a conflict is if you've given an opinion and someone thinks you could be biased. So I suppose the question for you, Councillor Rebecca, is that third last paragraph where you say, and having that the dam collapse, whether it could collapse or not, could be catastrophic. similar to the Chair's comments, would perhaps be an opinion on the matter. And so by saying those comments in a letter to the Minister, do you think that you're satisfied that a reasonable person might think you are biased in that matter?
Thanks, thanks, Councillor McMahon, through the chair. Really, that's a matter for the councillors to decide. You are in a position to determine if it's reasonable or not, but those words, pardon? So those two issues about what would happen if there was a failure of the dam and also the impacts on the neighbouring properties, those were relayed from the neighbours. And actually, from memory, I think you were actually there and heard those same concerns. So that's not a judgment call from me. That was relaying information that was said to us on site. But again, the reasonableness is up to the councillors.
Yeah. With respect, it didn't sort of say that. It didn't quote them. It appeared to be your assertion rather than that. I accept what you say. Councillor Bill.
Yeah, Chair, I have a contrary view to you. As a councillor and a layperson who merely makes an observation and backs it up with photographs and is there listening to the concerns of a constituent, whether it's this matter or any other matter, doesn't actually formulate in my mind that a councillor has a view about anything. In her capacity as a councillor, I believe she's acted, as the Mayor has rightfully said, discharged her duties, looked at it on its merits and acted accordingly. To actually imply that a councillor has an opinion, I think, is pulling a long bow.
Thanks for your comments. Just a natural reading of the sentence might have aroused my concern. I don't have a view on it, but I just felt it was important to raise that and seek Councillor Von Hoff's explanation. She explained it. That was the view of the neighbours that was explained to her. Yeah.
I'd just also like to add, because I think sometimes when we're doing this, it has to be very formal and we have to comply with the legislation, and so we should. But just from a personal perspective, we went and visited the site on the 27th of November, and the night of the 27th of November, it poured with rain. It absolutely poured with rain. And I woke up at 1 a.m. because I could hear the water falling, and the words of the neighbours were what was in my head. And I had a terrible thought of, if I don't act on this information, that will stay with me forever. If I haven't acted and people have said something to me and I was chair of the water portfolio and I didn't, as I saw it, discharge my duties, where would that leave me?
Any other contributions at this stage? Do we have to go into debate of the matter? If not, we have a mover. The Mayor has moved and Councillor Melissa has seconded. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. I did then ask for Councillor to move that we suspend standing orders. Mayor and Councillor Tim, all those in favour? Carried. The first item of business is a MCUI 2023-5490 and RAL 2023-5493, material change of use, impact, renewable energy facility and major electricity infrastructure in reconfiguring of lot, subdivide 1 into 2 lots, subdivision by lease and access easement, located at 3410 and 3694 Cecil Plains, Mooney Road, Dunmore. Could I pass over to the presenter today, who will be Sophie Spencer. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors, fellow staff and guests. This report before you is to consider a development application for material change of use, renewable energy facility and major electricity infrastructure and reconfiguring a lot to subdivide one into 2 lots, subdivision by lease and access easement, located at 3410 and 3694 Cecil Plains, Mooney Road, Dunmore. Wendy, could you please bring up attachment 4, please? The subject site is located within the rural zone in the minimum 100 hectare precinct. It's affected by a number of overlays. Please note that while the site is over 3,000 hectares in size, the development footprint relates to a portion of that site, which is 534.8 hectares, which is shown in the blue dashed outline on that figure that you can see. The development footprint is outside of Council's environmental significance overlay, which you can see in that image. And as detailed in the planning report in attachment 2, this development footprint also avoids state-mapped areas of regulated vegetation, and as such, no referral was required to the state. Could you please bring up attachment 6 of the plans and elevations, please? The proposed development is a 300 megawatt capacity solar farm, including a battery energy storage system, which I'm going to refer to as a BESS, with a likely capacity of 150 megawatts over 2 hours. The development site is identified as proposed lease A, and the lifespan of the proposed development is in the order of 50 years. I'm just going to take it the report has been read, so I don't have to go through a detailed explanation of all the various components, but I'll just touch on the key things. The solar modules and the associated infrastructure will cover that majority of the 334 hectares of area. The BESS covers an area of 2.35 hectares, and the capacity of the BESS, I'm advised, will be determined in final grid studies, but likely to be in order of the 150 megawatts over 2 hours. The facility has connection to the electricity transmission network via a proposed Powerlink substation that will be installed and operated by Powerlink as a separate entity. The application includes a reconfiguring a lot. This includes the proposed lease A, which is to contain the solar farm, and a 1 into 2 lots to create a 9,000 square metre freehold lot, which is shown as proposed lot 2 in, sorry, can you flick through to the following images? I think it could be the last image that shows the reconfiguring a lot. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. So proposed lot 1 will be transferred to Powerlink to become part of the high voltage electricity network. Proposed easement A provides access to proposed lot 1 through the solar farm down to Cecil Plains, Mooney Road. It is noted that the Powerlink substation is required to enable the connection of the solar farm to the high voltage network, and it's a necessary component of the solar farm. During operation, only 2 staff is required to run the facility. A site office and staff amenities are proposed, and this includes 4 car parking spaces. This is considered suitable for the use, and internal roadways and parking is going to be compacted gravel, which is considered suitable. The site will have a single access to Cecil Plains Mooney Road, and it will be designed to accommodate a B-double. The traffic impact assessment and submitted plans indicate there will be a rural basic right turn at the site entrance, so that necessitates road widening and line marking, and these are going to be conditioned, or they're put forward in the draft conditions. The following will consider the key issues in the assessment. Principally relates to the construction traffic impact. Could you please refer to attachment 6, the 3rd image? So this image shows the construction traffic route. The construction stage is estimated to be a 2-year period. The route will follow the most direct route to Brisbane, going east from the site onto Cecil Plains Mooney Road, which is a council arterial road to join the state-controlled network that starts at Cecil Plains. It's estimated that 13,700 heavy commercial vehicle trips will occur over the 2-year construction period. This is equivalent to 28.5 heavy vehicle trips per day. This has the potential to adversely impact Council's Cecil Plains Moonee Road, particularly in terms of road geometry, to accommodate the construction vehicles and the loading impact on roof pavement and cross-drainage structures, which could reduce the life of the asset and increase maintenance costs for Council. Conditions are recommended to be imposed to ensure that these impacts are addressed, and this is considered to be satisfactory. In terms of stormwater and flooding, the site is partly affected by the flooding overlay. A flood impact assessment was submitted by the applicant, and this has been referenced in the conditions and considered to be addressed. Amenity and visual impact, given the existing dense vegetation and distance to surrounding sensitive receptors, it's anticipated this proposed development is not going to have an adverse visual impact. Another key consideration is consistency with the zone and the agricultural land overlay. So the development under the assessment benchmarks of the Toowoomba Regional Planning Scheme, the development must not compromise the future potential use of the land for rural purposes and must avoid the fragmentation of rural land. The applicant's planning report states the operational lifespan of the project will be 50 years. An agricultural assessment that was submitted also outlines the rehabilitation of the land at the end of the project, which includes removing the solar farm infrastructure, levelling disturbed land and reseeding. A set of conditions have been recommended to limit the life of the use and require land rehabilitation at the cessation of use, and also to require the extinguishing of the lease area at the end of the use as well. It's noted that while proposed lot 1 is significantly less than the minimum lot size of 100 hectares, this is required to facilitate the connection to the high voltage electricity network. As such, condition 7 of the RAL has been recommended to ensure the subdivision cannot occur until the material change of use has substantially commenced. So essentially it can't occur in isolation. Noise and environment has also been considered. Essentially, there's sufficient distance between the proposed noise sources and nearby sensitive receptors to be within acceptable limits. Impacts on environmental values and the bushfire hazard risk has also been appropriately mitigated in the ecological assessment and bushfire risk assessment, which is recommended to be approved documents. The development application also included the land use definition of major electricity infrastructure relating to the BESS component. This report considers that the BESS is ancillary and subordinate to the primary use being the renewable energy facility, and such it does not require a separate land use definition. It is noted that there is a risk if the BESS is considered under the land use definition of major electricity infrastructure, as this type of use is accepted development subject to requirements in the rural zone, so it doesn't require a development approval. If this were the case, an independent standalone BESS could establish without a development approval and with no consideration of noise impacts, which can be quite considerable for battery storage facilities. On the basis of this potential risk, this recommendation also includes a refusal of the land use definition of major electricity infrastructure as a technicality, just to remove any confusion, just to clarify this doesn't result in any material change to the actual development itself, it's just the definition of the use. Further information that was provided by the applicant on the 14th of May clarified that charging from the grid network could occur in the instance the solar farm had no need or capacity to generate. So a clarifying note has been added to the conditions to make it clear that the conditions don't prohibit occasionally charging the BESS from the high voltage network where this is subordinate to the primary use of charging from the solar farm. The development application was subject to impact assessment and therefore public notification was required. No submissions were received during the notification period and no other written comments were received from the public during the DA process. I now open this up to questions from the councillors.
Thank you, Sophie. Just at the outset, I forgot to introduce the CEO, Mr. Pidgeon. Brian Pidgeon is here. Jane Bevington, the acting GM, and Kerry Musgrove, the manager of planning, as well. So we have questions. Can I start the ball rolling with a couple of questions? I think I've given notice of all of them to you. I hope I have. Anyway, one or two might come as a surprise. First of all, are there any infrastructure charges in the planning report? There's a section there for that. Are there any? And if so, how many? Or what are they?
Thank you for the question. Infrastructure charges unit prepares the infrastructure charges notice that's provided at the same time of or very soon after the decision notice. But they have provided a draft calculation of the infrastructure charge, which is $3,278.88. Just to note, so this relates to essentially the operation of the use, which has limited impacts, I guess you would say. So the construction impacts have had to be resolved by way of the conditions.
No, thank you. Will the refusal of the major electricity infrastructure, the second part of the application, put in jeopardy the project itself? Perhaps that might be a question to be presented to the applicant, I presume, but have you any thoughts on that aspect of it?
In my view, no. This is just really a technicality of what land use definition should have been used, and I guess through the application process it became clear that that wasn't actually appropriate and not something that we would do in any case. So no, I don't. This doesn't materially affect the project at all. It can still go ahead with all of its components, and as it's been proposed, this was just a planning
Thank you.
technicality.
Finally, in the conditions and grounds of refusal, this is to operate to up to 50 years, and then within 12 months of ceasing of the business, the system has to be decommissioned with the removal of panels, concrete pads, waste material, and levelling of land and seeding of the land thereafter. This is going to happen in possibly up to 50 years' time. What can happen with the applicant or the ownership of the project, the ownership of the land, etc.? I'm concerned that there may not be any methods of enforcing or even knowledge of those conditions, let alone enforcing of them in 50 years' time, other than if there were a bond required to be paid or a restrictive covenant registered on the land. I think bonds are usually paid with mining operations in the state to guarantee rehabilitation of the sites thereafter. Can you comment on whether or not we as a council have any power to impose such conditions?
Thank you for the question. So bonds, the bonds you were referring to under the state are set under a different piece of legislation. So they have a legislative framework in place, including scheme managers and a whole kind of team who are able to manage that kind of bond to deal with returning the land after a mining operation, which obviously can have quite significant environmental impacts as well as safety impacts with land contamination and water and groundwater and subsidence and such. Those provisions are not applicable to us under the planning framework, under the Planning Act. Council does require bonds to do with council assets that will be handed over, like water, road, sewer, etc. Those are usually security bonds or something similar. My colleagues at engineering might be able to give further information on that, but that's usually held over a very short period in comparison, so 12 months or so. So we don't, it's very unusual, I would say, for council to hold a bond for a 50-year time frame over something that is essentially occurring on private land. But I will add that there is a lease in place, and while we are not a party, and I'm not suggesting that we get involved in the grounds of that, but I would imagine that would be part of that lease agreement, because it's going to be held by the same landowner.
Thank you. Just that this is the first renewable energy application that I've come across, and there may be a lot more in the future, and it might well be that local authorities in other areas could be interested in that topic, and something that we might consider as a council making submissions down the track. So any questions? Councillor Von Hoff.
Thanks, Chair. Definitely is the answer to the sort of rhetorical question that was just put out there, because we've got increasing awareness that there's energy generation projects, the mining and gas are subject to one set of rules, renewables are set to another, and the bonds are something that I think this is actually going to be one of the last applications that come through under the old way, and I know certainly that there is a push for a different way of doing things, including a different code of conduct and so forth. So I have a comment and then two questions, if I might, Chair. Sophie, thank you very much for the report, and thank you for your speaking to that. So the report talks about the notification, and that there wasn't objections or support that was received for the application. It notes that there was one of the notification signs was removed without permission, but it was replaced, and the report doesn't raise concerns about that. We have to trust that that is the case. The two questions that I have, first relates to the flooding overlay and then the traffic assessment. On the flooding overlay, the report talks about the site sloping to the creek, and the Mayor, Councillor Manteifel and myself were present at a TSBE evening, I believe it was last week. One of the things that they were talking about was the current inadequacy, I suppose, well, some of the speakers, the current inadequacy with the planning schemes that are located in flood catchment areas and creek catchment areas, where if there were problems with the solar panels, a hailstorm was to go through, all of those shards from the solar panels would very quickly end up in creeks and end up down into the water system. There's no mention of any of that in the report. My understanding is that that's not something that we can consider at the moment. Is that the case?
Thank you for the question, through the chair. Look, I suppose I will put forward that's really a risk for any building or structure of if there was such an event of that occurring. I'm not of the view that that's something that we can necessarily consider. But perhaps I believe that the applicant and representatives should be here today, and perhaps they could give some clarification on those kinds of events and the resilience, I guess, of the panels to withstand that.
Thank you. The second question I have, Chair, it goes to the traffic assessment, attachment 2, page 11. It talks about, and you mentioned it yourself, Sophie, it says that it's not clear if the Cecil Mooney road can safely accommodate construction vehicles, and that during the construction phase, the amount of heavy vehicles on the road will, this is a quote, will reduce the life of the road and increase the maintenance costs to council. And those maintenance costs to council are actually the ratepayers. And I note in our conditions, the solution, I guess, that we've put forward and how we've proposed to address it is that the applicant assess at the end of the whole process a check to see it's all okay. and and to your words that that was satisfactory, I just propose it's not satisfactory because we've got a situation where there's not those checks and balances of the person or the group that is potentially responsible for reducing the life of the road and increasing the maintenance costs, then doing the assessment themselves. So I know that there's going to be more questions. I circulated with councillors a proposed amendment, and Wendy has a copy of that, but it just speaks to, instead of the applicant assessing at the end of the period that the roads are in a sound state, it's actually council that makes that assessment at the expense of the applicant to check that ratepayers aren't picking up the tab. Thanks.
Any further questions or comments? Councillor Tim.
Thanks, Chair. I have a few actually, and my first one was the road and the 13,700 traffic movements on Cecil Plains Mooney Road. I welcome the additional data by Councillor Vonhoff to make sure that Council is not burdened by that. Through you, Chair, to Sophie, the technicality that saw us refuse part of the, well, half the motion is a refusal, but you've said several times that this does not change the project and the overall scope of what's going out there. It's more or less a technicality. Thank you for clarifying that. I suppose we are, I suppose, at the start of a renewables wave, and we should expect many more of these type of projects coming in. Now, many of them are called in by the state, and we don't get necessarily a look in, but the ones that do for council. So it's technically non-consistent with our scheme. Is there any changes, first question, in a new planning scheme that we might need to make to accommodate these, should they come in, or you're happy with where it's at and the technical refusal?
Thank you for the question, through the chair. So I guess I can't comment on the new planning scheme. So I can't really make any kind of judgment or recommendation on that. I'm not sure where that stands in this particular matter. But what I would say that, while this is a rural zone and renewable energy facility is not specifically listed as consistent, what I suppose I've put forward in the report is essentially this kind of zone is probably the best placed for this type of use. But what needs to be acknowledged, and perhaps the way the current scheme is written, is allow for that limitation on the life of the use and then that rehabilitation of the land to ensure it can be used in future for rural purposes. So this doesn't become a legacy problem moving forward. So there is, I suppose, somewhat of a benefit by the fact that it's not specifically listed as consistent.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks for that. It's an interesting technicality that looks like we're refusing half of it, but doesn't mean a lot. So thanks for that. So this may be a question to you, Sophie, or may hear from the environmental team or even the applicant, but and excuse my layman's learning of solar farms. We get it from the solar farm. There's a big machine there that converts it into 240 and it goes into the grid basically. And I'm very aware this is effectively in the middle of nowhere, but are there any physical health issues from going near that part that converts it into 240 and into the grid? Is there any safety issues on that at all?
I'd have to refer over to Luke Jackson, our Senior Environmental Officer. Or Muddy, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor, through the chair. We have some very, very, very good separation distance from members of the general public to where the battery storage is located. At times, we do assess electromagnetic energy or radiation from particular developments, satellite installations, where they have very, very focused beams of energy. In this instance here, it was not deemed to require us to ask any further information off the applicant or to seek external advice at all. We're happy with this one.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that. Luke, don't go anywhere because I have another question through the chair. So solar panels and wind farms are something that I think, should get used to seeing in the back blocks of Toowoomba region, and whether or not the overall advantage is there is a conversation for another day. But it's kind of this new body of work, and there's emerging data on whether or not things like solar farms have detriment to local wildlife. In my reading of the whole situation, there are pros that, it's shade, it's little micro habitats, but also that there are cons concerning excessive heat and animals, bats, birds, insects drawn to that area and then, being injured by the excess heat. Does council have any information, knowledge or issue with the environmental impacts of solar farms?
Thank you, Councillor. Chair. Very interesting thoughts and questions around that. Certainly at micro level, sub level, if you have very intense radiation sources, maybe that's a problem. You can have microhabit issues where runoff off a solar panel itself is creating a little bit of channeling and some minor direction of erosion through there, which is impact on soil, which maybe increases some sedimentation within a creek downstream. In this instance here, we've got a lot of good separation from waterways with grass cover, etc. That takes away a lot of the silt load, so we're not really concerned about that. Animals, microfauna, bats with echolocation points of view may have a little bit of confusion around that. That's quite early. Council doesn't have many provisions within the scheme to really investigate that too much. We would, as has been already noted by some of the councillors, about if this is a ever-increasing trend and we're going to see these things pop up a lot more, I would suggest that, similar to the way that the industry of mobile phone towers has developed and changed over time 30 years ago, you're starting to see towers pop up. You're having issues with birds resting in them, roosting in them, and the industry itself started to formulate its own mitigation measures around those issues to try and detract birds away from that. In some instances, they create a special pocket for them to live within. Myself, I haven't heard of if it was a heat plume or a little bubble over those type of things. If there is any information the applicant wishes to provide that may further help allay any fears at the time, please ask them again. But at the moment, what our planning scheme allows us to ask questions around, we're satisfied at this point.
Great answer, thanks very much. That's all my questions.
Thanks very much. I think most of my queries have been answered as well. Just in relation to the, particularly the stormwater, the overland flow, and what have you, in regard to if there is hail or damage that's happened, what's the distance between where this is and to the creek that would be potentially collect this, or is there a risk mitigation measure that's in place to collect some of that if it is to be damaged and find its way into a creek?
Thank you. Through the chair. Look, I don't think it's within our jurisdiction or within our assessment benchmarks to be able to consider that sort of impact. There are some creeks and tributaries that are running through the site. With the solar panels, I can't actually say for certain the actual metre separation distance from each of those, but they are separated away from them. This will continue to be grassed. The applicant's agricultural land report put forward has outlined that sheep grazing will continue to be part of the land management, so it'll continue to be grassed, and that's as part of also dealing with the stormwater impact as well. So, yeah.
Final question from me, Chair, at the very least, and thanks, Sophie, very much. Conditions on DAs will stay with the land and with the project. So if this was to be sold, all those conditions stay true.
Yes, through the chair, that's correct. Yeah, so the conditions tied to the land. So regardless of whoever owns it or how often the land is transferred or different leases, the conditions tie to the land. They will continue to apply during the whole life of the use, including the cessation of the use conditions as well. And so, non-compliance with conditions also then offers us the ability to follow up with enforcement and compliance.
Councillor Trevor.
Currently, the land, it is used as grazing, and how do you rate the land? Rich, medium, poor? And I've got three other questions after that.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, used by the current landowner for grazing. This is covered by the agricultural land overlay and the state planning policy for agriculture. Look, to be honest, it's not evident to me whether this is high quality agricultural land or not. I really don't have anything further to add to that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
My next question is, if this solar farm gets approved and they build it, is the solar panel part fully fenced? And if so, obviously grass grows when rain occurs. How is the grass and the whatever else inside that going to be controlled? Because I'm not talking flood now, I'm talking bushfire. How is that going to be controlled?
Thank you. Through the chair. So I believe it is going to be fenced and it will continue to have grass there, and the intention is that grazing sheep will help to manage that grass.
Yeah.
They have submitted, in terms of your question about bushfire, there has been a bushfire report submitted, which has been assessed, and that has been referenced in the condition. That includes separation distances. They've included basically a buffer around their solar farm, as well as water storage as well.
Okay, and last question, creek. Is it a creek with water in it, sort of permanently, or is it just a dry creek? When we get 3 inches rain in a storm, it then has water in it?
Thank you. Through the chair. So this is at the top of the catchment. So this would be a dry, yeah.
Councillor Bill.
Thanks, Chair. On page, doesn't have a page. On the attachment 3, approval in part, 1.12, battery, the BESS system, and it talks about capacity and unless otherwise agreed in writing by council. Understand that the use goes with the land and it's for a defined period of 50 years, and there's another clean-up thing. Are we to assume by that there are possible other stages that will be plugged in to this? Other parcels of land that will come as future application for extension to this solar farm, hence otherwise agreed in writing by council, an upgrade of the BESS system, which then plugs into the Power Authority's substation?
Thank you. Through the chair. So to clarify, that the purpose of that condition as currently written is to acknowledge that the BESS capacity is yet to be determined, and they have to carry out some further electrical engineering studies, I understand, to properly formulate that. It is appropriate that we include a capacity on the BESS because they can result in a lot of noise, and that's been an assumption basically in our assessment to make sure that this doesn't result in adverse amenity impacts. But essentially that's to allow, if they do find that they need a little bit more, that we might be able to agree to that as long as it still meets our assumptions about noise. But if there is to be a far greater larger BESS or greater capacity, and particularly to do with the issue of noise, that may not necessarily be something that we will agree to, because that has the potential to have other adverse impacts. But there's no anticipation that there's going to be further stages or other solar farms connecting into
That's
it.
exactly why I'm asking the question, because my question is there capability in this land ownership for subsequent stages of the solar farm to be plugged into? And then it leads to a question of agreed in writing by council. Who is that in council? Is this a delegated position from the boardroom here, or is it this council in the boardroom here? And if, because of associated noise issues potentially, which you've highlighted, is it I don't know, how do we deal with the potential of, this is a modular system, they're not going to put another BESS, potentially another BESS housing, and run their transmission lines from that to the substation. Ideally, you'd want to build one facility and it's modular and it plugs in at the shortest possible without any attenuation into the grid. So are we confident that we're dealing with possible, and is that an MCUI in the future, or is it just, that's another stage of code accessible approval because the as of right use has already been granted over the activity and land use?
Thank you, through the chair. So your description of other future stages of a solar farm, that's likely that would constitute material change of use, and under our current planning system, that would require an impact accessible development application to be lodged. So you wouldn't be able to carry out that kind of expansion by way of this approval if it goes ahead under these conditions.
So is there there must be some level of knowledge or requirement around capacity of 150 megawatt 2 hours, unless otherwise agreed in writing by council. So if they need more, how much is that likely to be, and what is that? What does that look like as far as noise, or do we have any idea of that, or is that just an open checkbook on, yeah, okay, we thought it was going to be this big, but it'll actually be 3 times as big?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. So the condition sets the limit currently at 150 megawatts per 2 hours, and that condition would remain in place and attach to the land. The other wording that just basically is giving some level of flexibility if they find that it is somewhat different to that, and that wording is in place to avoid an unnecessary change application where that is somewhat minute or acceptable in terms of noise limitations. If it was going to be something in the order of 3 times the size, I would say that is not something that you could say is generally consistent with that condition. That sort of change would be something that should be sought through a change application process to amend the condition.
Sorry, I guess I'm asking maybe the applicant will be able to answer that if they're here. What's the quantum of? Is there any idea? I mean, we're at quite an advanced stage here on application. There'd have to be some.
I'll ask Manager Kerry Musgrave to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This condition sets an upper limit, but it's also meant to allow a little bit of flexibility, acknowledging that until the system is set up and run and tested, and keeping in mind that the technology for this sort of use is changing rapidly, we don't want to have the condition worded in such a way that any minute change would require a change to the whole application, the whole development approval if it is approved. So the idea is that the capacity would be set at 150 megawatts. It might be slightly more than that, and it would be up to the applicant at the time to justify why any increase in that would not constitute a change. So in the Planning Act, there's a whole range of issues that have to be satisfied about whether a change is minor, whether it's generally in accordance, or whether it's another change. So the onus at the time would be on the applicant to explain why this change should be considered generally in accordance or otherwise.
Thank you. If that exhausts the questions or comments at this stage. Oh, Councillor Edwina, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Sophie and Curry. Just a quick question. I thank Councillor Von Hoff for raising it before with the amount of trucks on the road, and I note the Dunmore feed block just down the road. Does it use the same, does most of its trucks come in and out on that Cecil Plains Mooney Road, do you know?
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Yes, I believe its site access does go up to Cecil Plains Mooney Road as well.
Yeah, okay, because we do know the wear and tear that they provide on the roads as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on. Yes, yeah, I do. I'll call the representation of the applicant, Mr. Neil Charlton of Jacobs Ground Australia Limited, for the applicant Samsung C&T Renewable Energy Australia Pty Ltd. Mr. Charlton, thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, firstly, for allowing us to attend this meeting. I'd like to introduce Mr. Steve Ann, who's travelled from Korea today to attend this meeting. I don't necessarily have anything particularly to say. We do know that we do want to acknowledge that part of the application was refused, but that we agree that is on a technicality. For the benefit of the councillors, it might be worthwhile me saying that the battery energy storage systems are an emerging technology. As a result of that, too, the planning framework that is prepared by the state is somewhat lagging behind, and as a result of the doubt about whether or not the battery energy storage system was, in fact, its own land use or ancillary to the solar farm, we took the conservative view and applied for two land uses, but as Sophie correctly pointed out, through the assessment, it was determined that that could be accepted as an ancillary use. So therefore, on paper, while a refusal is a bad thing, I would like to go on record and say that Sophie is correct, that the refusal does not materially affect our development application, so we're willing to accept that. I'd also like to point out that the area in which, and the shape, for want of a better expression, of our solar farm has gone to great lengths to avoid a lot of the environmental assets on the land. We have also agreed to a dilapidation survey report, which allows essentially an assessment of the road before construction starts and after construction, and then through that process, any damage to the road or the water crossings will be made good through that condition. And last but not least, because I know you've got a very busy schedule, so I'll be quick, I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank Sophie and the team for a very good professional assessment, and we look forward to working with council again in the future for any future projects. So thank you.
There might be some questions, Mr. Charlton. Any questions in relation to the proposed amendment at all? Mayor?
Thanks very much. Neil, thank you very much for coming along today. And Steve, thank you for coming all the way from Korea. I would hazard to guess to say that you've travelled the furthest to be here today to this meeting, and thank you for your attendance. I do appreciate that. Neil, in regard to the assessment of the road and the waterways, you said prior to commencement and then post, would you therefore be amenable for council to also do those assessments, or do the assessments, as Councillor Rebecca has mentioned, that council actually conduct those at the cost of the applicant?
So not to speak on behalf of council, but as a former council employee myself, I suspect it would be a lot of, it would put a bit of onus on your enforcement team. I think the general approach, not only taken here but in other councils, is that the applicant does that work. It's certified by a an RPQ, Registered Planning Engineer of Queensland, who is effectively independent. So it's not as if, you know, we hold the key to our own prison cell. To give you a rough analogy.
It's the first time I've heard that said in the chambers of local
so
government.
it will be done
And
independently.
hopefully the last. But no, look, I appreciate that, and perhaps with that clarification, and perhaps the cleaners can clarify that as well. It would be a third party that would be engaged. Perhaps is there opportunity for council and the applicant to agree on that third party?
I don't believe so. I think it's probably a question for Samsung, and I doubt they're probably in a position at the moment to answer that question. So sorry about that.
So it wouldn't matter, therefore, who, based on the answer around, has to be a fully registered RPEQ, ITSW, XYZ engineer, then that would be consistent. Obviously, it's their credibility at stake and their liability as well that they carry. Is that clear to say? There's a lot of chatting going on at the top here, so there might be a bit more information that comes this way. I was just sort of filling in the void there for a moment there, Neil. But it looks like Sophie might have something to say there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify that what we've done in the conditions is set up a framework to require the dilapidation periodic inspections and repair over time. So the applicant is required to put forward basically a report that has to be endorsed by council that sets out that periodic time frame and the maintenance standards that are required that will have to be endorsed by council. And as those occur over time, that will have to also be basically approved or agreed by council at that point in time. So we've got a set of conditions that talk about the framework, and then a condition that says the applicant must carry out the rectification works when it's actually required.
Okay, that's probably a little bit more than what one can take just from reading the conditions. So I do appreciate that. It's probably a bit more in depth than what it was. So no, I appreciate it. That's the only question I had. Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Neil.
James? Okay, Councillor. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Rebecca?
Thanks, Chair, and thank you very much for that. Can we just get up condition 77, please? I think that's the one that we're talking about here. And just to explain, I guess it's a concern, what we're trying to discuss here and work through is that it's a concern for councils, not just ours, all local governments, when we have projects that involve big, heavy pieces of machinery, lots of them on our roads and on our bridges and so forth, and there's degradation of those assets of council, and at the end of it, it's the ratepayers who end up trying to pay for it. And so that's the issue that we're trying to work through here. And so I had put forward a proposed amendment. We don't need to get it up at the moment, Wendy. If we can just have a look at what we say here, and to confirm, Sophie, to the Mayor's point, is this the condition that you just went into detail on about the periodic reports? Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so what I had, and there may well be no need for it, what I had proposed was that there would be a third party or council at the applicant's expense. But if you're saying that, it is a registered engineer who does those reports, it's not, to use another term, Caesar judging Caesar. That, just to confirm, that is the case, Sophie? Okay, well, in that case, I don't feel that there's need for the proposed amendment that I'd put forward, and I'm comfortable with condition 77.
Any further questions of the applicant's representative? If not, thank you. Mr. Chull. To my knowledge, there are no other submitters or no persons wanting to submit. So we will move, I'll ask for a motion to restate standing orders. Mayor and Deputy Mayor, all those in favour? Carried. So the motion that's required is that Council approve in part the development application MCUI 2023-5490 and RAL 2023-5493 for a development permit for a material change of use impact renewable energy facility and development permit for reconfiguring a lot subdivide one into two lots subdivision by lease and access easement pursuant to the provisions of Section 60 of the Planning Act 2016 and subject to the conditions listed in Attachment 3, and 2, refuse the development application MCUI 2023-5490 for a development permit for material change of use impact major electricity infrastructure pursuant to the provisions of Section 60 of the Planning Act 2016 on the grounds listed in Attachment 3. So could I have a move of that motion? The Mayor and Councillor Melissa. Any cause for debate? If not, I'll put the question. All those in favour? Carried unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry? It's freezing. Yeah, it's been freezing all day. Yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah, I know. I should have cracked the whip. So I just go straight into that.
Next item.
Yeah, next item.
This is Casey's last council meeting as she's going on maternity leave.
Oh, is it? Oh, righto. So, but coming back after that, hopefully.
Well,
yeah.
it'll be for 12 months. She
Okay.
won't take- yeah, she's leaving next Friday.
Can I say that publicly? Well, they've all gone, so you might as well. Yeah. Well, we might make a restart. Actually, we haven't adjourned, but council has sort of voted by their feet, and we have to accept the reality of that. So to progress, if we could, if I could get a mover to suspend standing orders. Councillor Von Hoff and Councillor Melissa. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is MCUC 2023-4570, Material Change of Use Code, Intensive Horticulture Blueberry Farm, located at 9203 New England Highway, GM, Queensland. I refer to councillors to Councillor Von Hoff's declaration that we discussed earlier, and council's decision for Councillor Von Hoff to stay. I pass over now to Casey McKillop. Casey leaves after today or shortly for next week for paternity leave, and we wish her well in that great adventure. Casey, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors, executives, staff and guests here today. I present a development application for a material change of use for intensive horticulture, being a blueberry farm located at 9203 New England Highway, GM. If you could pull up attachment 4, figure 2, please. The 32-hectare site is within the rural zone under the Toowoomba Regional Planning Scheme and currently contains an existing dwelling house to be retained and structures associated with the proposed use. The development is code accessible under the planning scheme and did not require public notification. Whilst formal public notification was not required, relevant planning matters raised in informal submissions and community correspondence has been considered in the assessment of the application to the full extent possible under the Planning Act. If we could pull up attachment 5, figure 1. The development proposes to operate from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. 7 days a week, producing a maximum of 120 to 190 tonne of blueberries per annum. During peak season, being July to September, the development will require a maximum of 30 employees. During October to March, 3 full-time equivalent employees, and during April to June, 22 employees will be required on site. The use involves a packing shed, workshop, horticultural greenhouse shade tunnels, and 3 turkey nest dams with an approximate combined capacity of 55 megalitres. 11 on-site gravel parking spaces are proposed, inclusive of 1 PWD space located in the northeastern portion of the site. If we could pull up attachment 4, figure 10. Access to the site is proposed via Carl Road to the south, connecting to Connolly Road, Perkins Flat Road, GM Station Road and the New England Highway. Conditions have been recommended requiring the sealing of Perkins Flat Road being a 6.5 metre seal on an 8 metre formation from the Connolly Road to GM Station Road intersections, and gravel sealing being 3.5 metres on a 6.5 metre formation of Carl Road for the full southern frontage of the site and Connolly Road from the Carl Road intersection to the Perkins Flat Road intersection. If we could pull up attachment 4, figure 9. Vegetation has been cleared within the state-mapped koala habitat areas, which are also within Council's mapped areas of ecological significance. A referral response was received from the state approving the development and imposing conditions including vegetation clearing, environmental offsets, covenants, vegetation management, rehabilitation planting and fencing. If we could pull up attachment 6, figure 1, which is page 12 of the document. Yep, that one. Thank you. The state response permits clearing of 249 non-juvenile koala habitat trees located along the southern site boundary and along the Connolly and Carl Road reserves. The response also requires 2 covenant areas to be registered over the subject site to protect the remaining and rehabilitated core koala habitat areas, and a requirement to undertake vegetation rehabilitation with the planting of 190 non-juvenile koala habitat trees. The actions maximise the retention of vegetation and ensures the future protection of areas of ecological significance. Conditions have been recommended requiring that works are undertaken in accordance with the Ecological Impact Assessment Report and that a licensed fauna spotter and catcher is engaged. Works external to the site are required to facilitate the construction of Connolly and Carl Road reserves. The intended use of the road reserve is for transport infrastructure, with the works required consistent with the intended function. It is noted that the existing road reserves are 20 to 30 metres wide and are sufficient to accommodate the works required to formalise the existing road network whilst maximising the retention of flora and fauna. It is highlighted that Council is not involved in compliance matters or action taken by any state department, including the Department of Environment, Science and Innovation. In relation to the Turkey Nest dams, as per Table 5.8 of the planning scheme, excavating or filling other than associated with reconfiguring a lot is accepted development if the development is in a rural zone associated with a rural activity and is for the purpose of or associated with, including diverting of water, including diverting of water or interference with the flow of water as defined in the Water Act. As such, the dams do not trigger assessment under the planning scheme. Despite this, Council sought third-party advice from the Department of Regional Development, Manufacturing and Water, being dam safety, where it was confirmed that a formal referral was not triggered. Outside of the development assessment process, the Department of Regional Development, Manufacturing and Water are the responsible authority for the assessment of dams and determining whether a failure impact assessment is required. Any assessment determined to be required by the department is separate to Council's assessment. Council also sought third-party advice from the Department of Regional Development, Manufacturing and Water, being Water Services, who confirmed that there is no unauthorised overland flow take under the Water Act being captured in the dams on site. The proposal has been assessed against all relevant assessment provisions, including the applicable codes in the planning scheme, and complies or can be conditioned to comply with all relevant assessment benchmarks. It is understood that questions were raised prior to the meeting in relation to recommended conditions 18, 29 and 48. If we could pull up attachment 5, figure 1. The submitted development plan includes a 13 to 20 metre setback along the western boundary, which is sufficient to allow for the required stormwater infrastructure and a 6 metre wide fire trail. Both the stormwater works and the fire trail were proposed by the applicant and detailed within the technical supporting documents submitted. Conditions require a subsequent operational works application be submitted for the stormwater works on site, where detailed design will be finalised and assessed by Council. Current infrastructure on site may need to be updated to ensure compliance with conditions of approval and subsequent operational work requirements. Erosion and sediment control is a performance benchmark that is accessible during construction and at the operational work stage of development. As the material change of use is not yet approved, an operational works application has not been submitted and the soil erosion and sediment control plan is not yet a reasonable requirement. Where an approval is granted, no works can be undertaken on site without the lodgement and approval of the required soil erosion and sediment control plan. At the completion of all construction and when operation commences, the development must then mitigate sediment runoff outside of the controlled drainage areas. Section 6 of the Cumulative Water Management Plan contains appropriate operational measures and is recommended for approval. Conditions have been recommended ensuring stormwater drainage and discharge is appropriately implemented, including converting to a lawful point of discharge, ensuring there is no increase in peak flow rates downstream. The RPEQ documentation submitted details that this is achievable. Detailed design will occur as part of subsequent operational works applications where the development is approved. All recommended conditions are reasonable, relevant and are achievable. Further assessment and detailed design undertaken at the operational work stage will confirm additional mitigation measures or works required to ensure compliance with all relevant assessment benchmarks. Alterations to the development layout and operation may be required where works are necessary to achieve and maintain compliance with conditions and relevant operational works approvals. Based on the assessment undertaken, along with the technical supporting assessments, it is considered that the development is able to achieve compliance in its current form or with minor alterations. In summary, the Blueberry Farm is consistent with the purpose of the rural zone, which is to provide for a wide range of rural uses, specifically including intensive horticultural activities. Therefore, the development application is recommended for approval. A revised set of conditions were circulated to councillors prior to the meeting to amend minor areas in conditions 74, 82, 84.2 and 106. The officer's recommendation is approval, subject to the conditions contained within attachment 11. We welcome any questions.
Thank you. Just as I understand it, it's a 32-acre site. It's a rural zone. It's code accessible. That's correct.
32 hectare sites, and yes, code accessible.
Okay. And the applicant, the application has complied with all relevant assessment benchmarks, including civil engineering report, the storm water management plan, traffic impact assessment, cumulative water management plan, air quality assessment, noise impact assessment, lighting impact statement, bushfire management report, on-site waste management plan, ecological assessment, waste water management study. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So the assessment undertaken has determined that the development complies or is able to comply with the imposition of conditions.
The only other question is that I note that there is a condition recommended for sealing and gravel sealing of relevant roads. The word recommended rather than required. Is any comment about that?
Thank you for the question. We use the word recommended because it's with you for a decision today, but our opinion would be that it is required for the development.
Councillor Tim.
Thanks, Chair, and I appreciate this coming to us, and good afternoon to the officers. I do have a lot of questions, and I propose that many of my colleagues may have a similar amount, but to start with, in full disclosure, I was invited, as many of my colleagues were, to visit the neighbouring properties in September last year. I attended to listen and to learn. I was also invited earlier this week to meet with the applicant on site, and I accepted with many of my colleagues. I was there to listen and learn, and so I think it's fair for me to, I was happy to visit one side, visit the other, but I still have a fair few questions that I'd like us to work through today. So thank you for the report. My questions sort of form around three main areas: water, roads and koalas, the big three that we like to deal with. Can I start with water? And I mean, we've already seen a letter tabled today outlining the concerns of, and it did accurately represent the concerns, to my knowledge, of the neighbours that contaminated water could overflow from the dams and leave the site, all right? And therefore we have it running downstream into neighbouring properties, creating havoc. I am aware that with the updated conditions that you've sent through to us, condition 26, while it's a very kind of standard condition that I see in a lot of DAs, it says all land adjoining the development, that's all of them, must be protected from ponding or nuisance, i.e. contaminated water runoff, from stormwater resulting from the development for the life of the development. So I suppose my first question is, that's a fairly standard condition. I see it in a lot of DAs. Should a neighbouring property be alarmed, or should they be comforted by condition 26 that their fears have been alleviated, in your opinions?
Through the Chair, thank you for the question. So condition 26 forms one of many conditions in relation to stormwater. So there are other requirements in the condition set relating to stormwater, which requires an operational works application, which involves detailed design of stormwater infrastructure required on site. So yes, condition 26 is a very standard condition, but there is a detailed assessment that goes along with that to ensure that there is no actionable nuisance.
And I can see them 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 and 31, where we talk about internal stormwater drainage, must be picked and discharged to a legal point of discharge, those kind of conditions, some of which are standard, but some of which are very tailored to this application, should give heart to surrounding residents that there aren't going to be any water from dams or otherwise overflowing and leaving the site. Do you think those conditions would give heart to the average person that it's legally, they're happy with those conditions?
Through the Chair, thank you for the question. It is Council Officer's professional opinion that the material that has been provided by the applicant demonstrates that compliance can be achieved with all relevant benchmarks, policies and legislation in relation to stormwater on site.
Thank you for your answer. As far as contaminated, I would seek, now my reading of it is the water comes from the roof of the Blueberry into pipes into the dam. So is there likely to be, but there is also bores feeding this, is there likely to be any contamination to the water in the opinion of the officers?
Thank you for the question. Through the Chair, I'll invite Marty Robertson to address that question.
So the document titled Cumulative Water Management Plan, which you
Yes.
find in attachment 7, which is recommended for approval, details water quality objectives, which are consistent with state guidelines. Each dam is proposed to have a monitoring point at the discharge where grab sampling must occur when rainfall occurs is more than 50 millimetres within a single day. We've also approved a plan which also states that no use of herbicides or pesticides will be used throughout the development, only fertiliser.
Thank you. So I suppose the last two questions have given me hope that the officers, in their professional opinion, are happy that there won't be any water issues relating to properties downstream, and I thank you for the time you've taken to explain that to the chamber and your professional opinion. If I could, Chair, go to some other questions, or would you like other questions on that? You happy? There is a question if a condition, and I'm talking about 48 with the erosion and sediment control, if a condition says you have to start this before the development application starts, and it's already partway through, and there are several conditions that say before it starts, what is the advice from you guys on how they're led to be achieved? Should the development have already started, but the development application says it's got to be done before it started? What's the standard way we work around that?
Through the Chair, thank you for the question. So at this point in time, the development has ceased on site, apart from the blueberries obviously being planted in the ground. So when we're talking about commencement of use, if the development is approved today, there are a number of steps that the applicant would have to take, a number of documents that would be required to be submitted to Council for endorsement before any further works or formal operation would be able to take place on site.
Right, so the 48s and the other ones that say before the DA is approved, you must do this, they would start prior to work continue. Thank you for that. I do have a fair bit of issue with the road. Now, I suppose one of the biggest objections of this was turning off the highway. I now know, reading the full report, that the applicant is constructing a full road around the back southwest of the property. My issue is there is a fair few red dots in that thing that said a fair few trees were getting cut down, but the trees are only getting cut down because condition 18 has bushfire control and says that the road must be this width, this length, this much sealed. Have I got the right condition? Hang on. It's thinking. Yeah. All right. So is that that's the bush, the one around the boundary of the land? Is it fair to say that most of the trees are being cut down because of the requirements of bushfire mitigation in Section 18?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. No. So the majority of the trees that are required to be removed is to formalise the existing road network. There will be some additional trees as marked on Sarah's referral agency response within the site, but you will notice, possibly if we could bring up attachment 6, figure 1, page 12 again.
Yeah, that's the one with the dots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wendy. So you can see there's 2 green areas on that plan, one located up further to the north and then down to the southern area. And so those 2 areas, they're proposed to be covenant areas, so a covenant will be registered over those areas for the rehabilitation and protection. They also are required to do some replanting within those areas, being 190 trees. The bushfire trails themselves are within the development site around the boundary, which is primarily already cleared. There are a few trees in the north eastern section, which will facilitate an appropriate buffer as well as the access driveway. But the majority of the tree removal is for the formalisation of the road network.
Formalisation of the road network. So that Blue Line Road, what condition is that in now? Like I saw one picture in the report, but...
Wendy, would you mind opening up the figures, please? There's some images of the road. Figure 10.
Figure 10. Sorry, it's before that. I think it's figure 8, 7 as well. So they're the ones So is that what it looks like all the way through?
So the image that's on the screen now is the GM Station Road and Perkins Flat Road intersection. The other image, if we scroll down, would be the Connolly Road and the Perkins Flat Road intersection. So the trees that are located on the left-hand side, some of which will be removed for the formalisation of the road, but not all of them. But yes, that's what's existing on site.
So this is a valid question. I know you've got to formalise a road, but I would personally feel much better if we cut down less red dots, less trees cut down for the formalisation of the road. So I'm very happy that that road is being put there, but it is costing us significant koala habitat, mature trees to do so. So are there any ways that the road can be formalised without cutting down trees?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. With the current proposed alignment and vehicle access to the south, the only possibility, I guess, would be looking at the alignment of the road. So the number of trees that are able to be removed, the maximum number is 249. So the construction of the road and the particular alignment will come back to council once the detailed design has been done under operational works. So the exact alignment of the road is not yet known. So during that detailed design, there would be an effort made to reduce the number of trees, but the approval has given a maximum number of 249 that could be removed. So it may be a lesser number. It can't be more than that. I guess in relation to other road networks in the area, the original development application that was lodged looked at a connection to the north. That is also an unformalised road reserve, and the proposed access was then through a reserve which also contains koala habitat. So that would also require extensive clearing, and it would also require the dedication of some land which is in that reserve area as road reserve, which is not something that council officers or SARA and TMR were in support of, given that there is an existing road network that's dedicated by council already.
No, thank you for your answers and the discussion. And I appreciate 249 is the max, but mate, there have been tears in here for less, I tell you. So, I would really like to have some conversation about that road, and I know it's got to be formalised, but how it can be done with less damage to trees. I think that's a valid conversation maybe for the applicant. Last question for me for now. 249 removed, and we're doing offset planting, and I think it was in 190. I've lost my point. 195 replacement trees, and I know where the offset area is because I've looked at it. Is 250 loss and 195 gain enough in your opinion?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So those requirements are not council officer requirements. That has been the response back from the state. But I would like to raise that. So there's 249 trees which are able to be removed. They have a requirement to replant 190. They also have a requirement for the equivalent of 186 trees being an environmental offset.
Oh, so it's both?
Both.
Okay. No, that's, thank you for your answers. They've been very helpful. I'll let someone else have a go, but thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bill?
Thanks, Chair. I've only got two at the moment. Figure 11, please, Wendy. Could put that up, please? I can't blow it up on this. It's having a hissy fit, the iPad. Is that 11? No. It's the, yeah, that's it. That's it. Question, even though it's no longer proposed, that access route, because of why you've explained, how do we propose to control the workers' access and possibly a truck that might slip in and out of there at, given the hours of operation of a night time? How do we propose to control that traffic? Because there's already an access to the property there.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So there is no current formal road reserve off the New England Highway at that point. Whilst there may have been some clearing and there is an informal access arrangement, that land is not owned by the applicant, so it will become a police matter at that point.
So that would depend on the neighbour reporting or whoever reporting. So this is a, so I'm you know, that's the, as I always say, the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, with a post-approval condition. So there's no real way unless it's reported, it becomes a police matter. And how, you know, I understand that this is used as an ordinary point of access now. Not necessarily the dotted line there, but there's access to the highway there from the house.
Through the chair, yes. So there is an informal access arrangement that's not been formalised with no approval to currently enter that way. I guess the only other option we could potentially look at is including a condition of approval that basically prohibits access from the north. I guess in that situation, if they were to access the site in that fashion, it would then become a compliance matter.
So in the interest of road safety, and obviously we've come up with a different way of accessing this safely, this lot, in the interest of road safety and the possible, you know, situation of something arising for the sake of an appropriate condition at the time, would you think it'd be appropriate on the front end of this application?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. I would believe it would be a reasonable and relevant condition if council sought to include that. We probably ask if the applicant had any objection to that, but it would be considered a reasonable and relevant condition, and something that we do impose on a number of development applications where we see that there's a risk of alternative access being taken, which hasn't been formalised. So we would support that.
Yeah, okay. May I humbly suggest that we, and that's open for a majority feel around the table, but that we do that. I've had the unfortunate occasion of having a near miss at that informal entry myself, frequenting the up and down the highway there. I'd hate to see it eventuate where it would be beyond a near miss. So I think it's a reasonable and relevant condition. And that's, I think that's why we've come up with another way of accessing the lot. My second question is, the no herbicides, pesticides used in the operation, fertilisers, those sorts of fertilisers, would they be phosphate-based?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. I'm not sure if Marty Robinson would like to address that, or that might be something that the applicant is able to elaborate on when they talk.
Yeah, and I'll give the background or the reason for my questioning. Phosphate fertilisers are a known problem to waterways and potable water supply, and given proximity and drainage into one of our potable water supplies. And we know that it doesn't dissipate, and we know that it causes blue-green algae, and we know that it doesn't break down readily when there are numbers of sources contributing to phosphate.
We'll ask the officer to comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just comment, but I'll also allow the applicant to speak on their behalf as well. The aforementioned water management plan that I referred to in answer to the previous question, Table 2 sets limits for both nitrate and phosphorus release from the water storages.
Okay. Yeah. But I'll leave it for now because I'm wanting to understand the collective impacts. This is from one development, one operation. Do we know of others that are downstream between here and the dam?
Through the chair, we are only able to consider this development on this site. That is all we're able to assess at this point in time.
Yeah, as I suspected. We deal at the other end with problems around contamination and pollution on many fronts, because we actually assess this independently and not consider collective impacts. Anyway.
Any further questions or comments at this stage? Councillor Trevor.
Just some questions. That private road access that comes in off of the highway there, and obviously you've said that it would be illegal to use it except for private access, which would probably be private access for the residents there, or no access whatsoever.
Through the chair, council are unaware of any lawful formalised access agreements through that reserve land. Yes. There may be some residents in the area that might have some agreement, but to our knowledge, the subject landowner does not have that.
I was just pertaining to the house that is on the property there. That may be their access point, or will you be basically saying private road is a no-go zone for anyone?
Through the chair, any existing lawful access arrangements that dwelling house might have would be able to maintain, because the development approval does not take away their use rights for that dwelling house. So any condition that we seek to impose would directly relate to the intensive horticulture use only.
Thank you. Another question. What qualifies as contaminated water? Is it water that just comes out of a dam? Is it water that's been stuff being put in it? What qualifies as contaminated water?
Ask Marty to comment.
Thank you for the question, through the chair. The answer is if it exceeds the water quality objectives, and they're actually listed again in Table 2 of the report of the Cumulative Water Management Plan. So they include ammonia, oxidize and phosphorus, turbidity, suspended solids, sulfates, alkalinity, etc.
Okay. So normal water filling a dam from the runoff, rainwater, should be just normal water, so to speak. It would have to have impurities put into it by human sources or something to make it.
That's correct. I believe there are also stormwater contaminants regarded to the amount of sediment within the runoff as well, but if the engineers would like to comment on that, but that's also a relevant parameter.
Okay. And the last question regarding trees being lopped and chopped or knocked down, with that plan that we had up there with the the green dots and the red dots relating to trees, if we can bring it back up. Will be happening soon.
Attachment 6, figure 1, page 12.
You're all over the attachments. Down the bottom there, where there's a lot of red dots, which obviously means removal of trees, can planting, all the plantings that we're planting, which is 190 trees plus 186 offset trees, are they all being planted up on the top part, or is there a sprinkling down the bottom as well?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So those two green striped areas are the two covenant areas. So that is where the 190 replantings will take place. In relation to the environmental offsets to the equivalent of 186 trees, there's many forms that environmental offsets can take. In some cases, it's a monetary contribution or payment. So we may get the applicant to elaborate on how that is being dealt with. The trees will not be replanted in those locations. The majority of those red dots are also located outside of the development site and are within council's road reserves.
Down the bottom, what I call the bottom of the map there, there's those green striped, not right down there, back to the property, those striped areas below that large dam. What is that going to be there?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So that is covenant area B. Okay. So that will become a protected area.
So the plantings could occur in that area?
Correct.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, thanks very much, Casey. And I thank my colleagues for their questions. We have lots of the same sort of questions. So with your indulgence, Chair, I have a few as well. Carrie, the amended conditions that were sent through earlier today, condition 82.2, there was a change that was proposed, and it's that the vehicle access, brackets, crossing the verge, close brackets, must be constructed generally in accordance and so on. And originally the conditions said sealed. So can you explain the switch from sealed to constructed?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So the original condition 82 had the word sealed in it. However, sub-condition 82.2 has always remained the same in reference to rural driveway standard. So given the locale, it is not a requirement that the driveway be sealed and all weather access driveway is reasonable. So this was an error in our part on the conditions. So we have sought to have that updated to correctly reflect the requirements being the rural driveway standard.
Thank you. And Casey, that policy that dictates sealed or not is dependent on, I was looking at the table before, there's so many attachments in there, is dependent on vehicle numbers. It's divided by townships and rural, but predominantly between vehicle numbers.
Through the chair, I will ask Michael Evans to come up and address that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey.
Councillor, through the chair. So the standard drawing, which is the IPW drawing for driveway crossovers, it has within that table, there's notation in it. So there's an allowance for rural driveways to be sealed or unsealed. The governing factor on whether we will seal a rural driveway relates to our local road adjacent. So if our road is a sealed road, we'll require the driveway to be sealed to prevent any loose gravel going onto our seal and then punching through and damaging our seal. Where we have a gravel road, we allow for a gravel crossover to connect into it. So that's the bottom line of that. Yep.
Thank you. My next question, Chair, I refer to attachment 2 in the board pack, page 18 of 21. It's in regard to site access. And it says the application material detailed that the access arrangements were existing, although not formalised. Existing lawful access to the site could not be confirmed, and as such does not form part of the assessment. Casey, why couldn't it be confirmed?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So there's no constructed road that provides the lawful access to that lot. There was some material, I guess, raised and submitted that looked at possible pre-existing consent from council or other parties allowing access through that reserve land, but it was deemed that it wasn't relevant or appropriate for this development application. So with regards to current access arrangements, we might ask that the applicant confirm how they currently access the land. But yeah, it doesn't form part of our assessment.
Okay, perhaps the applicant will make a note of that. Another question, if I might. The report talks about 5 informal submitters and the extent to which within the law that their concerns had been addressed. I personally had forwarded all the correspondence that has been received by councillors, and by my record, there was 74 informal submitters, not 5, and that's actually excluding those that weren't local, that didn't have their names and that were sent after Saturday night. So why were only 5 of the informal submitters mentioned in the report and not the total 74?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So we have included those 5 informal submitters throughout this reporting because they have been involved and provided correspondence throughout the entire assessment of this application since lodgement. This report is written and prepared weeks in advance of a council meeting. So those additional 70 plus emails that were received in the last couple of weeks came in after the report was completed, but we can confirm that correspondence was issued back to all of those submitters.
Thanks. And the attachment 2, page 20 of 21, mentions that the development application was lodged in response to compliance action. And my question is, was that a show cause notice or enforcement notice?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. I'll just provide a brief response in that because the compliance matters do remain separate from this development application, but our compliance team has confirmed that council did issue show causes as well as 3 enforcement notices.
Sorry, could you just say that one more time, Casey?
Our compliance department did issue show cause notices as well as 3 enforcement notices.
Thank you. My other question is in regards to dams and water, and we've got, my understanding is that the failure impact assessment is sitting with the State Department and still pending as they work that through. But there's more parts of a dam than just whether or not it is referable or not. And while this failure impact assessment is being undertaken at the state level, who's responsible for the erosion and sediment control in the construction of a dam? Because it seems to my reading that the state is saying that it's not them and council's saying that it's not us. So who is it?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So as detailed within the report, our planning team makes dams where therefore a rural use in a rural area accepted development. So the construction of the dam themselves is not something that we are able to assess. With regards to the assessment undertaken as part of the material change of use, we still do look at the soil erosion sediment control as well as the stormwater characteristics, but they are somewhat limited and not specifically relevant to the dams. However, our assessment that has been undertaken and the material that has been submitted has considered that, and I'd probably ask that the applicant elaborate when they talk to that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I hope the applicant can make a little note of that one as well. My last question, Chair, is in regard to the employees. So going back into the original assessment, which I'm actually going to talk about later as well. But going back into the original application, pardon me, it talks about how there were 80 employees, and then it got from 80 employees going back, and I'll talk to this in further detail, but 80 to 50, and then after the 50 we got down to 30 employees. Can we talk a little bit about how we got from 80 to 50 to 30? And that's the first question, and the extent to which those employee numbers have had an impact on the traffic assessments.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So throughout the assessment of the application, the applicant submitted a number of supporting documents. Throughout the process, particularly when we were looking at the traffic numbers, they submitted a revised traffic impact assessment that at the end confirmed that the prior documentation provided overestimated the number of employees required to run the development on site. So what we're referring to is the amended traffic impact assessment that was provided in response to Council's further advice notice, which confirmed the maximum number of employees that they would require would be 30. So that has been what Council has based the assessment on. With regards to impact on the network, the assessment that we've undertaken and the recommendations with regards to the construction of the roads is based off the updated traffic impact assessment. We've also undertaken our own independent assessment of that and deemed that the number of vehicle trips that is generated by the development is able to be accommodated by the construction works that we've conditioned to the road network. I guess in relation to the changes over time, that might be something that the applicant is able to address as to the reasoning, but we've based our assessment on what we've been provided with.
Thanks very much for your answers, Casey. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further questions or... Yes, Mayor?
Okay, just very, very quickly, this is one part of a process. If this was to go through, then there is the operational works, which from what we're hearing will cover quite a bit of what has been asked today. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, thank you for the question. So there are a number of conditions that we have recommended that require operational works applications. To name a few is the road construction as well as the stormwater management, but there will probably be others that require. So the detailed design will be done and submitted as part of the operational works application that would require assessment. If council is unsatisfied that conditions are being complied with or that the material submitted at that point in time is not sufficient, essentially we would work to get to a point where it was acceptable and we could recommend it subject to conditions, or it would ultimately be refused.
So I guess what I'm saying is that that's another phase that would come to this council, potentially.
Through the chair, thanks for the question. I'm not sure on the delegations in relation to operational works applications, but yeah, I don't know if Sanj...
Usually it wouldn't, but I just, some of the wording that has been used today is, council will. So I just want a definition of what council is.
Through the chair, sorry. When I'm referring to that, I mean council as in council officers under delegated authority. Should it be that it's called in or that delegation no longer exists, it would then come to the relevant executive or councillors. Yeah.
Councillor Edwina.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Casey. You've answered almost all of my questions. I just have one more. In relation to the 30 employees, which was 80, 50, 30, I noticed in the report there's only 11 car park spaces. Do you think that that's adequate?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So within their traffic impact assessment, they have advised that the likely, carpooling or travel arrangements for employees would be a shared arrangement, which is consistent with other agricultural activities where there's carpooling or small buses and the like. So their assessment has indicated that 3 to 4 people per car would attend the site. So given that there is such a change in employee numbers required during peak season and non-peak seasons, the 11 formalised car parking spaces is considered sufficient. It is noted that there is sufficient room on site for overflow car parking should that be required.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further questions at this stage, we'll move on to the presentation by the submitter. As a formal submitter, Mr. Brian Lyons. Ask Mr. Lyons to come forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the concerned neighbours and impacted neighbours, a number of who are here today in the gallery. I'd like to thank the council for calling this in as well. Councillors, sorry, for calling this in. Recognising the importance and the issues that are going on out there. Yeah, a lot of the information, has only just been brought to our attention. I travelled today, so a lot of the revised conditions we haven't had an opportunity to really spend any time on. I have prepared, I suppose, from our point of view, to start off, what a mess this has been. We've got an applicant who's refused to comply with enforcement notices. We've just heard 3 notices have been issued. Illegal tree clearing, dangerous access, taking almost 70 megalitres of water without a licence, taking up to 7 megalitres of water from a bore without a meter to monitor the take, clearing another 249 mature koala habitat trees, erosion and sediment loss, a peak season workforce, as we've just talked about, from 80 to 50 to 30. If this is not a mess, what is? We've just heard the scenario of carpooling. Who is going to control the carpooling? People want to turn up in their own car. They need 30 people. Maybe the original assessment was right. Who is going to police the carpooling? Is that something that council are prepared to do? Is it back on the neighbours to report? What is council going to do as we report? We've seen evidence of non-compliance and 3 enforcement notices. The business has continued. They're still growing blueberries. They're picking blueberries. My understanding, the explanation that was provided to me by compliance, was that all operations in relation to the development had to cease, according to that notice. That didn't occur. Compliance Officer Glenn Gallatley, he inspected the site on the 14th of 7th, 23. The developer was advised that he required a development approval to do the works he was doing, and the works should stop until an approval was granted. The works did not stop. Wards have been, the blueberries have been grown, they've been picked. Condition 3, we're struggling to get our head around. Condition 3 of the recommended conditions of approval says, unless otherwise stated, all conditions must be complied with prior to the commencement of use and thereafter. But the use has commenced. It's not making sense to us how you can condition it in that way when the use has commenced. This is not a normal development in that we've just witnessed a consideration of a solar farm whereby they've asked for approval to build a solar farm and the approval's been granted. This is different. This has been built and now they're asking for approval. Surely this is an opportunity to assess what's there prior to granting an approval. Most of the development is already in place. From our point of view, what we can see, a lot of the requirements are unachievable. The erosion and sediment control plan, it's to be done in a 3-metre space at the base of a 40 megalitre dam. The space is 3 metres from our boundary to the base of the dam. And that's where most of the water from the site is coming down through and discharging off the property. It would seem that it's unachievable to control, and I hear that it's going to be conditioned that they've got to submit an erosion control and sediment control plan. But if we can see now that's unachievable, and there's concern around it, surely it's an opportunity to look at that plan, to ask the applicant to provide the plan, to provide the solution before the approval is granted. Yeah, we see that the developer has chosen the wrong block. It had poor access. There wasn't adequate space to build what he wanted to build. There's water and sediment ponds that are needed, numerous conditions that can't be complied with. We see there's sufficient reason to refuse the application. The developer should have applied to the council and then construct the development in accordance with the development approval. Yeah, from the neighbour's point of view, we would like to see evidence that the impacts that we're currently suffering. I've got photos from this morning of the erosion that's leaving. It's approximately that deep at the base of the dam wall. There's been nothing done to alleviate that, and we don't believe that there is anything that can be done to alleviate it going forward. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
You may be able to expand on if questions are asked of you, if you don't mind, Brian. Any questions or comments that councillors wish to make? Councillor Gary.
Thank you. I take it you're the property on the bottom side of the dam?
We adjoin the dam.
Yeah, on the bottom side.
Yes.
Yeah. Your cattle or cultivation or?
We're cattle grazing.
Yeah. Do you use fertilisers or?
No.
You don't? And I hear you said a 40 meg dam. I think the 3 dams in total are 50?
Yes.
Yes. So it's not a 40.
Sorry?
The 3 of them in total are 50.
That's my understanding, yes.
Yeah. No, just you mentioned 40, like...
One dam is a 40 megalitre dam.
Is it? The other 2 5 each or something?
5 each.
Okay.
It's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
It's a substantial wall. If it reaches 10 metres, my understanding, it becomes a referable dam. And the RDMW officer is sending that measurement through. He hasn't confirmed that it's not 10 metres, but it's certainly in the vicinity. There's a gum tree at the base of it, and it's similar height to that gum tree, approximately 10 metres. It's not an insignificant structure.
Councillor Edwina.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Brian. Probably more for our officers, actually. Just 2 questions. You're mentioning you feel the developer isn't complying or won't comply. What if they don't comply once? If we approve something and set in all of our conditions, and then they don't comply with those conditions, what happens then?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So it's the same as every other development approval. If there's non-compliance with conditions, council will investigate, and if need be, we would take compliance action to rectify that.
Thank you. And also just addressing the erosion and sediment plan, I guess, and again, we've got the conditions in there, so if there is a bit of concern from Mr. Lyons about erosion and sediment at the bottom of that dam, we can then, that would fall into the plan, would it be covered by that?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Thank you.
Councillor James.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mr. Lyons. Appreciate you coming in. Just, you mentioned that, in your opinion, the requirements are unachievable. So we spoke about erosion and then obviously around the carpooling. Were there other requirements that you felt that you see are as unachievable?
The bushfire track is to go around the boundary. The boundary on our side, which is a length of the property, is used as a waterway. The all-weather road or all-weather access for the bushfire, there's no room for it. The dam, the 40 megalitre dam with approximately a 10-metre wall, comes within 3 metres of our fence. It's to be a 4-metre all-weather track erected for bushfire control around the boundary. Am I making a mistake with that condition?
Do you want me to? Through the chair, thank you. So if we refer to the development plan that's attached up above, which has been submitted and that council officers have assessed, the approximate measurement is roughly between 13 to 20 metres setback from that western side boundary. So we believe that there is sufficient room. The fire trail is a requirement of the endorsed bushfire management plan. The stormwater works application, which will be the subsequent operational works, will have to have a look at the location of any swale drains along that boundary. Should there be insufficient room at that point in time, it would be dealt with. But we've done our assessment based on the submitted plans and the documents that show that.
That's a photo taken this morning showing a 3-metre gap. That is not 13 metres. Can I show the chair?
That is our boundary fence. That is the base of the wall. That's approximately 3 metres, 3 steps across it. Can I show anyone else?
Yeah, so just I suppose that's a point of conjecture. Obviously, anyway. We'll wait for.
Thank you. The fence is our boundary. To the left is our property. To the right is a waterway that takes most of the water coming from the top end of the property. A spillover from 2 dams has to come down through that area. We are experiencing some sediment come through further up on the property. And then, of course, just below this, once it hits the waterway, there is heavy sediment, approximately that deep, in the gully itself. If we go to, so that's approximately 3 metres. As you can see, it's very narrow. It's not 13 metres, I'm sorry. The proposed bushfire track, my understanding, is 4 metres all weather in a 6 metre clearing. I can't see how it can fit there.
Any comment, councillors? Councillor Jones?
Is there any, have we got any clarity around, do we have a position on?
Casey?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. I guess in relation, we've done our assessment with the material that has been submitted. The applicant has also reviewed these conditions and proposed these outcomes within the documentation submitted. Should it be that what has been conditioned is unachievable, it would require the developer to lodge a change application back to council to have this amended.
Councillor Rebecca.
Thanks. Just before we move on from this one, so Casey, you said that officers, that's not, you initially said, I believe, 13 to 20 metres. That's not 13 to 20 metres. And then you said that officers have made their determination on the materials that have been submitted. So 2 questions. Have officers been on site? And second of all, have officers ground truthed the information that has been submitted?
Through the chair, a number of council officers have visited the site. However, we are required to base our assessment on the material that's been submitted to us. And based on that information, we've determined that those conditions are achievable. Should they not be, we would have to come back and reassess. Or the applicant would have to propose alternative arrangements. I guess it's probably important to note that the current requirements, there may be alternative outcomes that could achieve the same things and also demonstrate compliance. This is just one way that the applicant has explained, I guess, or demonstrated their ability to comply.
Thanks. So did officers check the information that was provided by the applicants? Did they check that that was accurate?
Through the chair, look, we've been out on site and look what's there. We can only assess what we've been supplied with. I guess based on that, that shows a different story in relation to what's been provided to us. So we do acknowledge that. But I guess we've provided our comments in relation to that.
Any further, Mayor?
Yeah, just from a practical sense of how it could be so different, is it measured from the water edge or is it measured from the extremity of the dam earthworks?
Through the chair, our understanding is it's measured from the outside point. Okay. It's probably also important to just note that no surveying has been undertaken at this point that we're aware of, but the applicant may be able to elaborate on why there is a discrepancy.
Sure, no, I appreciate that, thanks. Thanks as well, Mr. Lyons, thanks very much.
Councillor Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Lyons. There was an interesting point at the start of your speech, 70 meg of water taken with no licence. Can you explain that, where it was taken from and to where?
It was almost 70 megalitres of water. They're proposing to use 70 megalitres of water in total. They've got 7 megalitres of water that they are allowed to take from underground source, from an existing bore with irrigation licence. We have concerns along that, in that there is no monitoring on that bore. So there's nothing to say, okay, you've used 7 megalitres, pull up. We've all got bores in that area and we heavily rely on our bores. both for domestic and for stock. We are very concerned that an endless use with a high water use industry like this of that fragile low capacity bores that are in our area, that we will all suffer some impact from the potential overuse of that bore. The other issue, and we've taken this to length with Department of Water Resources, is the taking of the water off the roofs. Our understanding of the legislation and people that we sought advice from, such as Tom Carruthers, who Tom was a senior member in Water Resources, a senior policy officer. He'd been in the field. He provided us with advice that what was proposed there did not fit with the intention of the water legislation, of the Water Act. Leith Burley, a senior person, she headed Sunwater in Queensland. She inspected from our property the development and said, well, that's not in line with the intention of the Act. Unfortunately, we've taken it to Water Resources and they have ruled otherwise. But our understanding of the Act and the understanding of other people of the Act is that you're entitled to keep the water off your roof that is caught in a rainwater tank and used for domestic use. Otherwise, it's commercial water, it's irrigation water, and you require a licence. Unfortunately, and there is no licence in this case to use greater than 7 megalitres. So we still deem that the water is being taken without a licence. It's been taken out of your Toowoomba Regional Council water system. It's no longer there for everybody's use. It's been taken by one single operator and is being used for commercial purposes without a payment of money to the state or to council or anybody. So yeah, that's our side of that.
Yeah, thanks for your answer. I appreciate it. Perhaps we might ask the applicant at the appropriate time their version of events. But to our officers, my knowledge is that state government monitors bore use and we don't actually own any water. Is that a correct assumption?
Through the chair, that is correct. And we did refer this application for third-party advice to the department, and they provided us with a response that they said there was no unauthorised take of water.
Correct, and that's in the condition somewhere in the officer's report I've read recently. Thank you.
Correct.
Okay, if there's nothing further, sorry.
Thanks very much, Mr. Lyons. Appreciate it, and those who have advocated hardly with this as well. It's from your perspective, it's an agriculture pursuit. It does all those things that you would expect to be in that sort of an area. The points that you've raised are very well made and reasons to do it, to not accede to approve this. Given the fact that this is in where it is and it's a place of use that is for that area and would potentially comply if conditions were met, and obviously this is one that would be a real challenge, is there an objection for that use being in that site?
Thank you. I think what hasn't been considered, and my understanding is not in the planning system to consider, but we're in a rural zone. But the people here are with me and ourselves, we own those properties. Most of us have paid a lot of money recently for them, and we've paid that money because of the lifestyle associated. Our partners work in Toowoomba, they contribute to your region, and as a lifestyle property, I think most of you have actually looked at or seen the shade tunnels themselves. There is a visual impact on our properties from those shade tunnels. To say that that fits in with, it's a horticultural use and it fits in, is consistent with, that may technically be correct, but practically it has an impact on our properties. It's changed the environment. It's not horticulture if you wanted to have a normal take a normal horticultural development. It may be avocado trees or a vineyard or whatever. This is not the same as that. This is stark white. You considered a solar farm there before. I would say that a solar farm up against your fence would be something similar visually, have a visual impact in a similar way. My understanding, the solar farm would be impact accessible. This seems to be slipping through the cracks, but it doesn't change the reality of the impact on our properties from the visual impact. Outside of that, to your question, can I seek leave just to, there's a couple of other photos there, if I can address a couple of other photos in answering your question.
If you're answering the question, yes.
Yeah. Is it acceptable? We don't believe that can be conditioned. That is erosion. Most of that soil has ended up down through our fence onto our property and onto the other properties further down into your water system. So there is a lot of objection to the way that this development's been done. The way that the applicant at this point in time hasn't been able to be, there's been no compliance. To condition this going forward would seem almost impossible, knowing the history of this development and the applicant that we're dealing with. So I don't know if that helps to answer your question, but that is our concern. That's environmental vandalism.
Councillor Von Hoff.
Thanks, Chair. Through you. Brian, you talked about the interpretation of the Water Act and that there's some conjecture about that interpretation of the Act in regards to capturing surface or overland flow. And I guess that will be, that interpretation issue is one for neighbours as well as us here today. But the question, Chair, is do we have anybody from our water portfolio here today? No, we don't. Okay, because this is in our Kubi catchment, and I wonder if there had been thought given from our perspective about the capturing of surface or overland flow, because that then pulls into Kubi. Have we given any thought to that in the assessment?
Through the Chair, thank you for the question. So as part of the material that the applicant submitted, they did include that, and it might be something that they're able to talk to further. The application was also referred off to our Water Services Department, and they provide a response back saying they had no objection to the development.
Thank you.
Okay, just an observation. The concern with the 3 metre or 13 metre distance between the fence and the dam is the fear of fire escaping from next door to you. That's the problem?
There's a condition applied there, and we agree with the condition that they should be able to access around their boundary for the purpose of firefighting. Yep. We're in a high fire risk area. We've all got expensive homes, yep. So we want the ability to be able to fight them, yes.
No, I understand. Thank you. Okay, Dave. Further question? Councillor Musa.
I do, thank you, Chair. So just trying to understand this 3 metre v 13 metre discrepancy here. And from my understanding sorry, this is a little bit better. Let me move it so I can see you, Mr. Lyons. So this discrepancy, and from the photos that you've shown, is from one side of the dam. So how long is that part? Like, what's the length of that?
I haven't measured it, but I would approximate in the vicinity of 80 to 100 metres.
Okay. And so the circumference of the dam would be how much, do you think?
Sorry, I probably overestimated that. It would be in the vicinity of probably 60 metres.
Okay.
The circumference of the dam? Well, the length of the dam, yeah, there would be drawings where that would be available.
I'm just trying to understand the firefighting ability that if there was a fire, the inability of firefighters to get around the dam.
Well, you've got the dam.
So we're talking where it says Dam 3, that there, so it's on the applicant's side of the purple line that we're looking at. Is that correct?
Yes, the Dam 3, where the red dot is, that's our property is to the left.
Yep. And so it's that component there at the end of the dam.
That's right, and then there's a drain goes out behind that dam, which I believe would be difficult to cross. But it's certainly impossible to put an all-weather track between the dam and the purple line.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Lyons.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, thank you, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Call upon the presentation by the applicant, believe it to be Simon Lott, Planning and Environmental Consultant, Enviro Ag Australia Pty Ltd, and if required to answer other questions, there's James Johaz and Harriet Veal of Consultants Property Projects Australia. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors, Mayor, Deputy Mayor. There's been quite a discussion, and what I say straight up is we're very happy to answer questions. There's already been a lot of questions raised, and some of the answers haven't been delivered. So I'd like to deliver whatever answers I can today. What I would like to do is get those photos back up, if I may, please. While the photos are coming back up, I'll do a short introduction of myself. My name is Simon. About 20 years ago, in this building, 5 minutes, I understand, I participated with Ed Rock in forming the first catchment management association in southern Queensland, the Connemine Alliance. I was a founding director. So when it comes to water, contamination, consideration of our catchments, I know that area very, very well. So very happy to answer questions in relation to that and also the Water Act. Okay, so first of all, it's impossible to put both a track and a waterway up that boundary. Rubbish. If I made that an armoured waterway using rock, 75mm bluestone, I can have a win-win. I can have a waterway and an access track. How wide is your car? 1.8 metres. 2 metres. I can get a vehicle up that boundary right now, using an armoured waterway. It serves both a waterway and a road. Easy. So when somebody says it's not possible, it is most certainly possible. There are alternate solutions that can be delivered now. So when we look at the conditions and can we answer this with, can we comply with these conditions? Yes. Does it mean that the site is perfect today? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There is work to be done. And I'm sure Peter Rolfe will say that. So I'm one of those GXYZ engineers. I'm a registered engineer. I actually have to act independently. I act independently for the Department of Water. So, yes, I am one of those people. Okay. That's the first point. The second point is that on the 28th of November, just after that rain that our council has actually referred to, I was on site. Council had been to site, there had been an inspection, so had the Department of Water, and I had received a phone call and I was on site. On that day, I issued make safe directives, which is rare for me as a registered engineer. Now, what I can say is that Peter Rolfe and the Blueberry Farm actually have complied with all of those make safe directives. Yes, there has been an issue with compliance. This development is here by two reasons only. One is misadventure. Things have not been done properly. Is the Blueberry Farm remorseful? Absolutely. Is it correcting it? Absolutely. The second reason is agitation. And I take the point, there were 5 submitters up until a few weeks ago, and now there's 74. What's happened in the last week? Singularly, that is agitation. Now, it's not that we shouldn't be here to consider issues, debate those issues, raise questions, have them answered. It's not to say that we shouldn't do that. We should absolutely do that. But let's use the truth, let's use fact, not fake news. So this photo, if you look at it at a basal level, yes, there's not enough distance there. What can we do? Well, the first thing at a compliance level, we can actually make that distance larger. Make the distance larger. 2, we can armour it. We can put a waterway in it. There is a solution. That solution comes from detailed design and operational works. The applicant is 100% committed to doing that and doing it properly. So, misadventure. This is a code accessible development, a rural development in a rural area. In any other scenario, it would be vanilla, ordinary. It's been called in. It's been called in from compliance. It's been called in by agitation. That's fair enough. Can it be fixed? Absolutely. Can compliance be achieved? Absolutely. Can the conditions be met? Absolutely. Very, very confident of that. So I might just go to the other photo. I guess Mr. Lyons has had the opportunity to raise these, so I really would like the opportunity to answer them. This erosion is the result, the direct result of the fact that construction has been interrupted. Construction has been interrupted. Mr. Rolfe would like to fix this. But to do that, you require construction, which is operational works. So it's a chicken and the egg. Things need to be remedied, but to do that, you need to restart construction. So it's an ongoing blemish that can't be remedied until we actually get some construction back underway. So we'd like to see this fixed. It's happened because of an intense rainfall event, but it's an outcome of the fact that when construction was required to stop, it was stopped. And this is an outcome of it, a negative outcome of compliance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from councillors? Councillor Bill?
A negative outcome from compliance, would it be safe to say that the timing on operational works, usually operational works is approved after the application is approved?
Correct.
Understand the anxiety from our neighbours, and I understand my job as an elected representative too, sir. Thank you.
It is understood in response. The misadventure is things are back to front, and that's not appropriate, and that's accepted. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A few questions, if I may. Some of them I've already asked, so I'll ask you. Your view on now. This is what my report says. Advised on 1st of February, this is from the Department of Regional Development, Manufacturing and Water Services, The department has had significant involvement in the development due to some public concern raised about the take of water. The department's compliance team conducted several field inspections to ensure that there was no unauthorised overland flow take being captured in the 3 storages. So I need a few questions answered here. Your bore allocation, no overland flow, is that correct? And are you licensed? Are you able? Is it legal to harvest the water from your roof and put it in your own dam and use that?
Okay. So I'll make reference to the Water Act, the water regulation and the overland flow provisions. And there's very specific clauses within the overland flow provisions, both the regulation and the Act, that says if it's a built structure, the water that is associated with that built structure is explicitly exempt in regard to overland flow take. So you have a roof and you have a rainwater tank, perhaps on that roof, that is your water, okay, for both stock and domestic. And the way it works for any roof structure which is a built environment, it is explicitly exempt. The fact that that water is recycled is actually, in this case, a beneficial outcome. The remainder of the catchment, which is related to overland flow as an agricultural catchment, is not caught by the dams. The dams are essentially a turkey's nest. They actually have a crest that is above ground and no OLF from the general catchment goes into them. They are segregated dams, okay? So just to touch on the distance from the dam to the boundary, if I may, to answer that now before it gets raised. That's from the crest to the boundary. There has been survey already undertaken. Nobody's disputing that distance there. The batter may need to be adjusted, may need to be modified. That would be a detailed design operational works matter. But yeah, there is survey data, and I think we've already shared that with Department of Water and also Council.
Yeah, so thanks for that. My question, we need to go back to the road.
Sure.
So the email that I had 70 odd times said there's 4,000 square metres of koala habitat being destroyed. What I'm hearing today, maximum 260 trees for the road to be formed, for the zigzag road to get into the rear access of the property. Little much for my liking. Can you talk me through how you're going to do that?
I'm going to, if I may start with the big picture, the road easement is variously 20 metres to 30 metres. The road easement is defined by the state government for the purpose of a road. Lawfully, it could be cleared by DTMR, any proponent, any agency. It could be cleared fence line to fence line today with no permits, no offsets whatsoever. And in that case, it would be way more than 249 trees. The Blueberry Farm's gone to the trouble of actually putting a red dot along that easement for the purpose of actually defining what is actually there and what the best outcome is. So the road alignment so far, albeit at conceptual level, is actually placed to minimise the number of trees to be removed. We have had ongoing conversations with both road engineers and council about shrinking the pavement width. Initially, council had actually asked us to make it over 10 metres wide. We brought it down to 8 metres wide, specifically for the purpose of reducing the number of trees to be removed. So that's the minimum. And I'd make the point that the Blueberry Farm's actually putting the offset on their property, private property, with a covenant to actually protect it. So that covenant for the offset is actually going to get carried forward on that land. So specifically, it's not on any other Crown land or on any other property. It's actually on that property as to make it contiguous with the other vegetation areas. While there's an impact, 249 trees, there's actually probably, in all probability, a beneficial outcome because of a greater continuity.
Councillor Duina.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Simon. Just in relation to your turkeys' nests, so they've been filled just purely with water from the roof, no overland flow?
Correct.
And then there was reference earlier to bores. So how does bore water roll in and work within the operation with the turkeys' nests? How does that work?
So The intent of the blueberry farm is to contain its footprint and to recycle as much water within that footprint as possible, which is just good water resource management. The bores are really there as a fallback, right? So there are dry periods. The bores themselves are actually the least preferred water because there's some salts in there. So the rainwater is actually very clean water, very low level of contamination in the actual rainwater proper. So the bores are there. Can they be metered? Absolutely. Putting a meter on it makes incredible good sense, right? Because I'm quite sure that the blueberry farm doesn't want to be doing anything illegal. So putting a meter on it, no problem, all right? So it's the secondary supply, and there's a lawful take from that bore, and if there's a meter on it, then basically you shouldn't take any more water than you'd want to take from it. But I'm going to make the point, it's actually the least preferred water supply because it's got an inherently high level of salt.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mercer.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Simon. Thank you. I didn't understand the term armoured waterway. Can you just expand on that, please?
Sure. What's an armoured waterway? So in the world of soil conservation, we have contour banks, and you've seen them out in the paddock, right? And it's typical that those contour banks are on a 0.25% grade. They go to a grassed waterway, all right? Grassed waterways are pretty commonplace across the Downs, all right? Have been since the late 60s, early 70s. Where you've got a confined area, where you've got a steep grade, you go away from grass and soil and you go to an armoured waterway, and they variously start with gravel, and then the size of the gravel gets bigger based on the erosive force on the water. So in this case, I'd be saying, looking at the grade and knowing the site, you'd be using 75 mil, 150 mil armoured bluestone, and it's packed, and it's still trafficable. You can drive your car along it, albeit a little bit bumpy, all right? But it can do two purposes: carry water, also carry road. Trafficable is trafficable.
Thank you. I did have a question about the intention of the Water Act and the runoff, but you've already answered that question, so thank you. Can I ask you to answer the statement made that there is erosion and sediment going onto the neighbours' properties? Can you just talk to that, please?
Look, it's fact there's a photo there that shows an erosion gully that's formed following heavy rainfall. We've got exposed soil. We've got an incised zone. So what's happened there is we've got water coming off the area that's been partially built, and it's hit the batter of a dam. And what that does is bring water to a common point, and it's a V, and it's where all of your erosion kicks off because that's high energy. Without doubt, soil's moved, and you can actually see the fan of the soil just on the right-hand side there. So will some sediment have moved? Absolutely yes, right? How's that occurred? It's because the construction has been stopped, and yes, it's back to front. Things haven't been done in the order that they should have been done. That's accepted, understood. So yes, soil will have moved, right? I'd make the point that soil moves off every property. In this case, though, it's related to that gully. If it's 60 metres long, if it's 1 or 2 metres wide, okay, if it's half a metre or even 1 metre deep, 60 by 2 by 1, basically 120 cubic metres of soil. All right. Probably lose more soil off the range every day in a storm than we do from that rill. Okay. So yes, soil has moved. Yes, sediment will have moved. All right. Is that acceptable? Absolutely not. Does the blueberry farm want to do something about it? Absolutely. I have issued make safe directions against that about putting things in place. I have visited the property after I actually asked those to be put in place, and they were put in place. I can't comment about anything recently. I haven't been to site recently, but I do know that there's been an intent to actually try and do something to protect the land. Yep.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, thank you for that, Simon.
Okay.
Simon, what do you mean by misadventure?
What do I mean by misadventure? Well, specifically, we have a rural producer, has multiple farms, and this is not uncommon in rural Australia, what we did in the 1980s and 1990s, and we were able to put up a shed, and in some jurisdictions you're allowed to put up a hay shed within 200 metres of the boundary with no regulatory need whatsoever. Okay, you can put up a rural building today, no application in some jurisdictions. So the misadventure here is actually to kick off on a development believing that there was not a great need for compliance or for approvals, and work commenced. Is that proper? No. Is the applicant remorseful? Yes. And that's the misadventure. Overstepping the mark in terms of applications. I'll make the point in the show cause notices and the compliance clauses, when construction was asked to be stopped, it was stopped. All right. I've come in subsequent to that, and I guess everything has really occurred post that, and that's why we're here today. That's the misadventure.
Okay, thank you for that. There was a show cause notice and then 3 enforcement notices. If we accept what you just said, that the misadventure was to kick off on the development without compliance or approvals, and that there was remorse shown for that, why were there 3 enforcement notices after a show cause notice?
Look, the best summary I can give, I can put it in the simple possible, is the wheels of government all work slowly. That's 1. And then 2, they're not being related. So let's take both stop construction is 1, and then separately we've got a clearing issue. All right, so they're all interrelated per se, but they're not actually sequential, if that makes sense. All right. So I haven't brought with me the complete time log, but as I say, in each step, my observation is that there has been a remedy put in place. So if we take the clearing, most of the property is actually white on a PMAV. The area cleared is related to 1 dam. It's the area about of a house lot, all right? That has been remedied already, right? There's already agreements in place with the state, all right? So that's, for the want of better words, been attended to, and that's understood.
Okay. Just 2 more, Chair. Simon, you'd say from your words, Mr. Rolfe is an established farmer. He's been doing it for decades.
Yeah, yeah.
He knows farming. He knows his
Yes,
business.
He does.
Yep. So originally, the estimates for 80 employees, for someone who knows their business, to then get down to 50 employees, and then
very explainable.
get down to 30 employees.
Yeah.
And I went back and I read the reports that were put in during the application process from consultants talking about the amount of traffic and the amount of tonnage from other blueberry farms in southeast Queensland. How do you explain going from 80 to 50 to 30?
It's a very human response, if I may, and I need to be human today, all right? We had a very short period of time to respond to council. So, the development obviously occurred. There's a show cause notice, and our business, which works with agricultural development, was brought in very quickly. We asked, how many people do you have in your operation? Well, that's the totality of the total operation. So when we asked the question, the answer was about the total, not about the subset, which is just that singular operation. So the 80 is a human mistake. Right? That's us asking a question under pressure about the totality of the workforce at a maximum. So if I can put it simply, it's kind of like 80 across all the farms at the maximum, as opposed to this specific development. So that's our mistake, and I have to take that, and I apologise for that mistake.
Thanks. And then lastly, if we could just get the other photo up, please, the first photo that was put on the screen by Mr. Lyons. The fence, yeah, thank you, Chair. Yep, that's the one. If we can get some clarification, because I think there's two sort of issues for clarification here. The first is the actual information and the veracity of the information that's come for the width. And then also, secondly, the difference in what officers said and what you said between the measurements. There was a question asked about, do you measure from the crest or do you measure from the base? Officers said the crest, you said the base. That's other way around, pardon me, other way around. And can we get clarification on the difference there, please? And then also the accuracy, 3 metres compared to much more than that.
So I've walked up there, I've supervised our surveyors going up there. It's plausible, 3 to 4 metres up there. It's tight. Some of the batter needs to be tidied up. We've surveyed that and we surveyed the dam. So the measurement that's probably been applied in probability actually relates to measurements that we supplied to the Dam Safety Committee, all right? And that relates to the body of water to the boundary because of a potential burst, all right? So it's not the bottom of or what we call the toe of the batter, it's actually probably in the water body. And that's simply just a measurement that's actually what we call on plan. I'd make the point, we've suddenly dived into the world of detailed design and operational works as opposed to an approval per se. And quite happy to take the questions on point, but I'd make the point, if we need to make changes here, that is entirely possible as part of detailed design and operational works. Nobody's denying that there's 3 to 4 metres up. I come back to the point. Can we put a waterway there and a road up there? Absolutely. So some of this, there's alternate solutions that are entirely plausible. Entirely plausible.
Thanks.
Just to clarify for my benefit, is the 3 metres I thought was from the fence to the bottom of the wall? As
the toe, yes.
Not the top of the wall, but the bottom.
This is the point. The 30 metres is all probability measurement that we've supplied to Dam Safety. If I may, I have been present when there has been, there's been 4 compliance visits from the Department of Water, and I've been at every one of those compliant visits. 2 visits from Dam Safety, I think, 2 from Department of Water in regard to overland flow. I've been present for all of those, and they have been pretty thorough and they have been pretty demanding in terms of the data that they've required. We've supplied all of the data. My understanding is the Dam Safety Committee have no further interest in the dam.
Councillor Trevor.
Just in relation to the erosion and then fixing the dam up, as in that wall, fixing it up, will it compromise the integrity of the dam? As in, if you take some of that wall away there and take it 1 metre, 2 metres, 3 metres, whatever it will, and then you reinforce it somehow, will it compromise the integrity of the dam? Because I've had built dams on my own property years and years ago, so I know a little bit about it.
That's all right. So, short answer, for this particular structure, no. The dam is fully lined with a HDPE liner. That immediately means that your wall structure is inherently dry. So,
how thick is that liner?
It's 2.5 mil liner, so it's quite thick. 40-odd% of the dam capacity is actually below natural surface. So if we're talking about the 40 megalitres or so, it means that 20 metres is below surface, can't actually escape. So it's a cut-fill dam. So yes, there is a substantial wall. It's got a substantial freeboard. So we could bluntly pare that batter back without an appreciable risk to that dam.
Second question, if approved, what order will you undertake to get this up and running? To me, it would be the road first, because you need people to come into it. What order will you take, and will there be any more misadventures during the process of going from woe to go?
Well, access is key. There's an existing access, which is a driveway access to the house.
That's for the resident.
It's limited.
There.
And DTMR have been very specific about you are not to use that. So bottom line is access is critical.
So that would be number one.
Yeah.
And that could take months.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Just clarifying that. What is it going to be the cost of the road? Ish. I know there's no definite.
Look, to be really honest, I haven't sat and done that calculation.
That's okay.
There's still a lot to be done. There's geotechnical assessment that needs to be done. We need to actually look at the interaction of the road with the rest of the property. So we have a access easement that's usable, plausible, but the actual cost is at this point unknown. It could be between 500,000 and 2 million. We don't know that number yet.
Okay, or it could be more.
Could be more.
Could be more. And fourth question, you might be not able to answer it. If the blueberry farm is not approved, what do you do? Do you go to a higher authority, or do you?
Yes is the short answer. This is a code accessible development. It's a rural development in a rural zone. A lot of effort has been put into actually attending to the numerous questions and queries that have been raised. The development was stopped when show cause and compliance created that enforcement. There are things that need to be remedied, as we've seen today. All right. Short answer: yes. It will go. It will get escalated.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Simon. You've obviously answered a number of the questions around this. I suppose the only one I wanted to finish on, I suppose, and it's more an overarching one. I'm sure you've probably seen and appreciated that there's some angst within some of the neighbours, and I'm sure you can appreciate and respect there's some broken trust, as you've sort of mentioned, just from different things that have occurred for whatever's happened in the past. But I mean, that's all. We can only look forward. So, what assurances, I suppose, would you give the residents around here if this is approved that they're not going to have any? Because I suppose anyone of their property, they want nil worsening impacts on their property, and we've spoken about the works and things that have to be done. But I mean, for them, and of course, obviously, knowing their level of, I suppose, control over it is basically reporting through to compliance. So I mean, it's a lot of this is obviously impinges on the applicant carrying through. So I suppose that would be my question from your point of view. What assurances or what guarantees would you give those that are here that have experienced this angst and concern? And as I said, I'm not putting words in their mouth, but the term of broken trust moving forward.
Kind of like the security service guaranteeing Donald Trump there's not going to be another assassination attempt. So,
I know, but I think you can. I know, but I think you can.
Guarantees are tough, all right. So,
no, but I think you can appreciate where I'm coming from.
Perhaps I can use some observations. There was a site visit. Council visited the sites, the blueberry farms, and council's seen an established blueberry farm. In my opinion, it presents very neat, very tidy. Very organised, utterly professional. Manicured is probably the word I'd use. All right? Everything's mown and neat and tidy. Now, I've been on and off that property numerous times now, and what we saw for the council visit is no different to what I've seen in numerous other visits. All right? So I think the reassurance is that the new farm will be similarly manicured, similarly attended. Neat, tidy, presentable. I do believe that with planting back trees in the offset areas, a degree of aesthetic pleasure can be derived from the property in those plantings and its layout. So it doesn't necessarily need to be, for want of better words, look too industrial. It wouldn't look like a solar farm, that's for sure. So Can I give a guarantee? No, but can I observe that the operations that I've seen so far, are they manicured, professional and well laid out? Absolutely.
Yeah, appreciate that, but I mean, so I suppose also, but those other key things I spoke about with fixing things around, whether it's erosion, water, all those sorts of things.
Nobody wants them. Peter Rolfe and the Blueberry Farm don't want them. They don't operate that way. It's an outcome of the situation, all right? Does anybody want this? No. No.
Okay, Councillor Bill.
Thanks, Chair. If you permit me, my question is actually, in fact, to one of our staff, the young gentleman, the road engineer over here, if you wouldn't mind. Just if I can revisit the numbers of employees, how they it went from 80 to 50 to 30. I guess there's two parts to my question. Under the methodology that we apply on traffic movements, what would be the difference between 80 and 30 on average traffic movements per day? And the second part of my question would be, is there any difference in the requirements of the standard of road built between 80 and 30 staff members and the associated traffic movements?
Councillor, through Mr. Chair. So there will be quite a large difference. If you're based on the traffic report we've got, so if this, based on what we're saying, if there's 19 employees, they're assuming there's 3 single cars and 4 shared cars. So if you're basing on that ratio, you're probably looking at double, if not just a little bit more than double for your traffic volumes. I don't have the exact numbers, but I think the key thing will be condition 80 of the report will actually enforce a maximum vehicle trips per day. So that's a maximum number of vehicles entering and leaving the site. So on that basis, there'll be a maximum of 42 vehicle trips per day. So that's only going to allow 21 vehicles to drive along the road. The second part of that question, there is a threshold for gravel roads through our planning scheme as to what that threshold is for changing. So the threshold for a gravel road to no longer be gravel is 100. It's 100 vehicles ADT, which is annual daily traffic, so equivalent to trips. So we're saying they can have a maximum of 42. The threshold that'll take that from a gravel road to a seal road is actually 100 trips.
So is there any difference in the type of construction on the gravel road between if there was to be an equivalent of 80 staff at any stage beyond application and 30? Is there any difference in construction quality of a gravel road catering for the difference in those traffic movements?
No, so the minimum widths that we've conditioned for the upgrade to occur, that would stay the same between the 80 to 30 staff members. The threshold's not large enough to push it into a larger.
Even if there was the likely or unlikely or possible scenario of up to 80 staff at any point in the future, well within the confines of a gravel road spec there with those traffic movements of up to 80 staff.
Yes, it's important to note though, if that were to occur, it would be a non-compliance against the conditions. If they wanted these additional staff, they'd have to come back in for a reassessment. At that time, we would consider the traffic volumes again. An important consideration there is when we look at these traffic volumes, we're considering any other background traffic as well. So hypothetically, in 5-6 years, if they were to come back and wish to change the traffic numbers, the staff numbers, that could be impacted by other developments in the area or a difference in traffic growth. So we will consider the traffic volumes at the time of the assessment, and we will make a judgment call based on the available data at that time.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Okay, if that's the extent. Mayor?
Very quickly, thanks very much. Yeah, through you to Simon. There's a couple of little things that will probably you'll be able to shed some light on, I think, Simon, and just add to or to answer some questions. There's 186 trees for an environmental offset. There was conversation about whether that would be trees or monetary or whatever. Do you know what that would be at this stage?
Okay. Sorry, just let me gather my thoughts. The 186 probably lost my offsider who's the ecologist. I'm not an ecologist, right? So we have basically we have a recipe defined by the state, right? Because in this case, the state government has actually directed us to do various things. When and how will the plantating occur is probably one of the top priorities, right? The species, I don't recall all the species, they're actually part of the recipe. One of the things that I can comment on is that some of the area that has been included in the map was actually white on the previous PMABs, right? And so we've been at pains to extend the area so that the green area gets bigger, which is what we call about contiguous landform, right? So the totality of it is the 249, and then we've got 190 and 189. The actual total is far greater than that because we're actually adding in existing mature trees in that landform, right? What that number is, I don't know. In terms of the planning, it would be both seedlings and more mature trees against the species list that we've been directed to use. Yep.
That's right. That's okay. I was just we're getting some clarification about what that will be, and you've answered it. It will be vegetation. It'll be more trees.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's fine. The other question that was raised was in regard to the car parking, 11 car parks that have been put on site.
If you wander around most horticultural areas, carpooling and minibuses are the order of the day simply because that's about getting all people, a group of people together on site on time so they can do the job. If that breaks down and you had numerous cars, there is ample area around an overflow area, all right? So 11 seems entirely reasonable from observation from the current operations. If there's a problem, there's an overflow area. But I'd suggest 11's more than enough for the current scenario.
Yeah, well, given that you're only at those peak periods, I guess, for a small period of time. The commentary or the concerns raised, amongst other things, from the submitters was around visual impact.
Yep.
Is there opportunity, perhaps, to use some of that revegetation or trees to actually put a border or a vegetation barrier around some of this?
So the issue of the cleared trees, compliance and remedy for that is already tied off and formalised against these plans. So there's no opportunity to actually change that because that's a state government outcome that's already in place to remedy one of the misadventures, right? So there's no specific ability to actually change that vegetation plan now and that remedy for a visual screen. Is there an opportunity to put a separate screen in to, for the want of better words, shield or put some sort of barrier between a neighbour and the facility? Absolutely, yes. How that would occur, honestly, it would come back to a design issue because we need to create the space for that shield. I'm quite sure that there's that opportunity, right? What I would suggest that would be an outcome of both design and operational works.
I guess there'd be no condition in there at the moment in regard to a vegetation tree buffer or what have you in regard to that. Is it something that could be conditioned?
Through the chair, I guess from a planning scheme point of view, there are no assessment benchmarks in relation to a provision of separation or buffer areas between this type of development and adjoining properties in the rural zone. However, if it was something that the applicant wished to, I guess, propose, we wouldn't be against including conditions, but it would be something that would have to be recommended by the applicant in our opinion. We don't have a head of power under the planning scheme to require them to do that.
It's fine. I guess I raise it here because we've got to go through another process, op works, and there's probably an opportunity to do that. I guess where I'm coming from, I think Councillor O'Shea alluded to it. I think everyone who is in a fairly close-knit community wants to work with each other. That's the ultimate. It may be a dream, but that's the ultimate. Maybe attainable, maybe not. But I think if this does get approved, we should, in all conscience, work with neighbours to get the best outcome. And I'm sure, very sure that Mr Rolfe would like to do that from a Blueberry perspective. There has been misadventure. You've highlighted a lot of those that have come through there. The agitation, I would suggest, might be a word that you might choose differently next time if you were to present, because I think it is the right of every community member to voice their opinion, and they've done that. And it's our job as councillors to receive that. And I have to tell you, I think it's been more than 74 emails. Certainly my PA would suggest it is. So I guess that's something that may be taken on board for next time. But I do value the input that's been given by both Mr Lyons and yourself. I do value that. And with that being said, I'm happy to continue on with the meeting.
Councillor Rebecca.
Thanks, Chair. Just one last question through you. Simon, is it an organic blueberry farm?
No. So let me just, if I can just provide some clarity, all right? Blueberries, the genetics of a blueberry, and I've been well trained by Peter Rolfe and his team. They're a very resilient plant. They do not need a lot of chemical. They require some pruning. They are grown in a prepared medium, and they do require some fertiliser in that medium. That fertigation is applied through drip irrigation. So in the context of needing some fertiliser and there being in a designed soil medium, they're not an organic berry. I'd make the point if they were an organic berry, they'd be that small, as opposed to the large juicy ones that you might have observed. Must apologise. I don't mean to be imprudent when I use the word agitate. I'm a very direct person, so I don't mean to be imprudent. I apologise if that's seen as that way. Back to the organic.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the absence of pesticides and herbicides and the fertiliser and organic status or not.
Yeah, they're in a controlled environment, and that's part of the tunnels. It reduces the pest challenge, and that's one of the benefits of actually having the intensive housed system for the berry. Right? So it reduces that, what we call that pest challenge. Okay.
That might be it. So thank you for your presentation. Sorry, another question? Sorry.
Yeah, probably, through your chair, probably to the officer, where did we arrive at with a condition on the, I don't know how to describe that
prohibited access?
Yeah.
Through the chair, I've got some drafting of words that we can have a look at that, yeah, I can put to you and we can discuss if you like.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll ask somebody to, of a councillor to move that we come out of reinstate standing orders, rather. Mayor and Councillor Trevor, all those in favour? Carried. Thank you. So what we have to determine is the motion that's been foreshadowed that council approve application number MCUC/2023/4579 for a development permit for material change of use code intensive horticulture blueberry farm pursuant to the provisions of section 60 of the Planning Act 2016 and subject to the conditions contained within attachment 11. It's been foreshadowed that there will be some alteration.
Through the chair, I'm not too sure. Would you prefer that I sit with Wendy and we get it up, or would you like me to give you... I've got two options of wording that you might want to use. With Wendy? Perfect. Yeah, I'll read them out first. So I would recommend that we include a condition being 82.4, so we don't have to look at renumbering and it sits within the access conditions. The wording that I would recommend is access to unnamed road 302200 is prohibited at all times following the commencement of use. Alternatively, if you weren't comfortable with commencement of use, access to unnamed road 302200 is prohibited at all times for the life of the development.
Bring that forward to I'll ask for the motion to be moved as I read, with the addition, insert sub-condition 82.4, vehicle access to unnamed road 302200 is prohibited at all times following the commencement of use. So if I could have a, question? Or?
So at all times following the commencement of use, so that means that once that other road is built and then we progress to doing work to the tunnels and maybe planting more blueberries. So am I understanding the road gets built first?
Through the chair, that is correct. So they need to establish lawful access to the site. So that will be undertaken. I guess the commencement of the use is once they've undertaken everything they are conditioned to do and provide to council, and then they formally commence the lawful use on site, that would be that point in time.
Mayor, you move the motion?
Oh, no, happy
No,
just to add
question?
the word lawful before use. You just put it in there. That was nice.
Yeah, we can add.
Commencement of lawful use.
Of lawful, the second last word is to be lawful.
That's it.
Yep.
Through the chair, I'd just like to add, if the development is approved today, that's the way it becomes lawful. Yeah.
So just the second last word, insert lawful.
Is it direct access? Direct access.
Oh, I don't know. Don't know, mate. I'll send you out there. Your retirement. Councillor Bill.
In the context of the unlawful access to the road, we understand that the application goes with the land and not the owner. So an as of right use in the future, this would cover beyond this application, beyond this owner, and potentially to the next use, which might be raspberry farm or whatever.
Through the chair, so this condition relates directly to this development approval, being intensive horticulture for a blueberry farm. So if the use changed on site, they would, I guess if it was accessible, we'd run through the same assessment process, and whether or not that access arrangement was approved or not would be subject at that time. But yes, the condition runs with the land for the life of the development.
So we know it's unlawful now, that access, so it's not likely to change unless they get approval from main roads. So this is...
Through the chair, I guess they currently don't have formed road access to that northern road. It's an unformed road reserve with vegetation that sits within it. So there's nothing that's been formalised at this point in time.
So are we confident that we don't have a situation where this does change down the track and we're dealing with entry via that unapproved access?
Through the chair, if there's a different use proposed over that land, they would have to demonstrate compliance with the relevant assessment benchmarks at that point in time. So this condition directly relates to this development approval that we're looking at today. Anything in future would be dealt with at that point in time, and at that point it would be determined whether the northern access would be appropriate or not at that point in time, if that road has been constructed or not. There's multiple things that would have to be considered. But for this particular use being the blueberry farm, if we impose that condition, they aren't to access the northern road ever.
Right, thanks.
Well, if that exhausts the questions, ask a councillor to move the motion that's been added to as Mayor and seconded by Councillor Melissa. Do we wish to go into debate? Yes?
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you. Firstly, thank you, Casey, very much as the planner and officers. Thank you for your input today as well. To Mr. Lyons, thank you, appreciate it, and others that are in the room, and those that have also been active in this space to ensure that this development does comply and fixes the misdemeanours, I guess, is probably a nicer way of putting it. And thank you to Simon for your information as well. I do appreciate that. I think making a decision like this is difficult when we're almost retrospectively making it. There's been some things that have been done and identified as being done that there is remorse for. What I was seeking for today was surety from the applicant that this would be rectified and rectified in a manner that, as close as possibly could be, to, I guess, give confidence to those neighbouring properties and those around them that the particular areas of visual amenity, of road access, of the safety of water, and all of those things that have been raised over a period of time to give me confidence that I can, in fact, vote in favour of this. And I'm comfortable to sit here and do that, which is why I'm happy to move it. It is a code accessible application that's been mentioned quite a number of times. Let's park that for a moment, because irrespective of it's a code accessible application, councillors still have the prerogative, as does the community, to seek councillors' endorsement to bring something to the table. And that's done, that's been done, which is why we're here today. And I have to say, the information that's been shared by both the submitter and the applicant has been very useful for all councillors, and I would say even our staff and the broader community to understand the history behind this, where we're at now, and where we can get to. It is a rural pursuit, and it is in the rural zone. And therefore, on the balance of all things that have been discussed today and what I've heard and the varying levels of legislation that's being required from a state perspective, particularly around water, and I do take note of the applicant's willingness to put a metre on the bore, and I'd suggest when we get to operational works that might be something that could be discussed as well. So on the balance of all of those things, and with the hope that what we've heard today, which is on public record and can be looked back upon and watched any number of times, can be achieved. That would be the ultimate outcome. So on the balance of all of that, I'm happy to move the motion.
You, Councillor, Speaker against? Councillor Rebecca.
Thanks, Chair, through you. My debate's going to start off exactly the same as the Mayor's, because Casey, I want to say thank you to you. I think you've done an excellent job, and I think that you have worked incredibly well with the information that you've been given. And I also want to say that I too came into this looking for surety, and that's why I'm voting against it today, because when I came into this and I was looking at the conditions, that's where my head was at. And having gone through the past however many hours we've sat here, I cannot put confidence in the veracity and the truth and the accuracy of the information that we have to consider here. We've had a show cause notice and 3 enforcement notices. And on the original development application, question 22, is this development application in response to a show cause notice or required as a result of an enforcement notice? No has been marked. I'm going to park the illegal removing of koala habitat because that's the state government's responsibility. But then I had questions about the staff levels. And why I had questions about the staff levels is because those staff levels have an enormous impact on the traffic management. And we'd gone from 80 staff to 50 staff to 30 staff. So we're now at 37% of the original numbers that were estimated, and it took 2 revisions to get there. Now, I asked questions about why, because I certainly didn't want that to be something that had been reversed engineered. And we were told that it was a human mistake made under pressure. These are professional consultants. Next, we go to a fire break buffer, and we're told that it needs to be a certain width. We get the photos up, and even upon trying to understand it, we're told that no, it's not acceptable. It's absolutely not acceptable, but we can work around it. And we've got one sub-condition inserted none of this has been addressed with these sub-conditions that have been inserted. We're told that we're here as a result of misadventure and that it is inadequate. But we're also told that there's been remorse displayed, and yet we hear the words that there's been agitation demonstrated. And to me, when we're trying to move forward and have a situation where there would be trust and the actioning of conditions, saying something is sort of dismissing it as agitation is at odds with saying that there's remorse. And so when we are sitting here today, what are we actually approving? We haven't got confidence in the widths, in the heights, in the fire breaks, in the surveying. So can any of us say with confidence exactly what we are approving here today and that it is the will of this council? The question was asked, what if this is refused today? And we were told it's going to be escalated. And do you know what? I just think, well, a bunch of us generalists have sat here for 2 hours and found a lot of inconsistencies in the information. I think with the application of subject matter experts rigorously in investigating this information, there might be much more clarity about the application inconsistencies, the distances. So it does come down to that surety and that confidence, the veracity, the truth, the accuracy of the information. And we have to be confident to support this. And I think that any councillor who puts their hand up today to support this, it's an exercise in optimism over experience, and even that is being generous.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tim, thank you.
Does the seconder of the motion want to speak for it?
Sorry.
Okay, so just offering. Chair, I would like to speak for this motion today. And I think that in this position, what needs to be done is to get both sides of facts, sit down and to find the commonality if there could. And each case needs to be looked at in light of its own fact. I would like to say that I really acknowledge there have been significant issues raised by those who live in proximity to this, and they are very valid issues. They are very valid issues that I wouldn't like if I was living next door. There have been significant issues raised with roads, with koalas, with water. I do think, perhaps in contradiction to the last speaker, it would be quite unfair to judge a development by its current non-developed state when there is significant work and conditions to be carried out. All of the issues I had, I think can be conditioned and have been very well conditioned by the very thorough development application with conditions put forward by our officers. Should this development application have come in as it should have without work starting, I think you'd lay down open misere. We wouldn't be here. It would be done by officers. The issue that I have is, and the conundrum in my head, is more concerned with the fact that the applicant went out, removed koala habitat, built dams, probably didn't do it with an application, and that's the issue we find ourselves in today. I also appreciate that where my head is at is that I don't really want to be rewarding the idea that forgiveness is easier than permission, and that you go out and build it and then go sorry. But I actually think I have seen today genuine remorse and the fact that we want to follow the process properly. We're happy to follow the process properly, and that there will be significant steps, significant time and significant cost put in place to make sure that this is done properly. I note our compliance said you shouldn't go any further with the development application without a development application. So to come here and ask for a development application at any stage would be the logical next step. I want to say again, I appreciate remorse, just as I appreciate the very valid issues and the time that the neighbours have had to go through with this. Sometimes in this job we're asked when one neighbour versus another neighbour and we're in the middle, and it shouldn't be, the moral arbiter, but I would ask that as best as is possible, it would be my will that neighbourly relations are stored over the back fence in a rural setting, just as they are in suburbia. And that's not something that this chamber can decide, but something that has to be done by the goodwill of people. So, Chair, on balance, we have a site that had work started, work was asked to stop, a development application sought. We have the development application today, which adequately conditions everything that needs to be done. And that's why, on balance, I believe there is no other option but to support this. And I know that the end result of this product, when the conditions have been put in place, will be something that the applicant is proud to present to the community. So that's why I feel like it has to go that way. Thank you.
Speaker against? No further speakers. We'll put the vote. Could I just indicate something that I didn't inspect the property either at the invitation of the submitters or the applicant, and I was advised that that was the proper course for me to take, having not been there once, not to go there at all. So the motion has been read out. All those in favour?
Do you want me just to sum up, just very quickly?
Oh, sorry.
Sum up. Can I thank you, Chair, and again thank you to everyone who's spoken and contributed today. Much appreciated, and particularly thank you to Councillor Vonhoff, who has obviously clearly got an alternate assessment of today's what I have, and that's the benefit of having 11 people around the room, or 10 in this case with Councillor Carroll. An apology. That's the benefit of where we are, and we have that good, robust discussion. The question was asked by Councillor Rebecca, what are we approving? What we're actually approving is a development permit for material change of use code-intensive horticulture. That's what we're actually approving today. There's a whole other step of operational works that need to go through, and I would say probably more than 60% of what's been discussed today will fall into operational works. That's why I say this has been so important today, this discussion, because I think officers, although this may not come back to us, have heard quite clearly that we need to, and the great word of coexistence is around at the moment for other sorts of developments, but I would suggest to you that this is more about existence, cooperation between all parties, and no one is going to always win. Irrespective of what rose-coloured glasses we're wearing on any particular day, there'll always be someone that will feel disadvantaged. At the end of the day, councillors need to make a decision on these. It's been brought to the table. The decision is simply for a development permit for a material change of use code intensive horticulture, Blueberry Farm. That's the decision for today. So in summary, Chair, can I just finally thank all of those that have been part of this today and impress upon the applicant particularly to work through as quickly as possible as we approach a summer and what is anticipated to be quite a wet season, to work as quickly as possible to get an operational works in and for council officers as quickly as possible to assess this so that we can give confidence to those who are around this development that we'll make good. The applicants will make good on their promises today, and that this development will be something that all the community can indeed benefit from its employment, from its produce, and all of those things that we hope it can do. So in summary, Chair, thank you for the opportunity to sum up.
Thank you. We'll move to the vote now. All those in favour? Those against? Councillors Rebecca and Bill. Sorry.
Have votes recorded.
Votes recorded. Councillors Bill and Councillor Rebecca against. Before concluding the meeting, could I also thank particularly the submitters and the applicants who have attended today. Your contribution was very helpful for the decision of the councillors, which is a difficult decision to make. Could I also thank our staff, starting with Wendy and Deanne, and of course Brian, our CEO, and our officers next to me, of course, particularly Sophie, and the other officers who have been here willing to assist and sometimes have assisted when called upon today. Greatly appreciated, and also to my colleagues who will be pleased to get home earlier tonight than they did last night, because we're leaving about 40 minutes earlier than we left last night. So thank you one and all.